131. I just met him, she said as tears welled up in her eyes. I don't even know him. Good. Now do yourself a favor and get out of here and never look back. He doesn't care about you or the microbiological bullshit he's feeding you. He just wants to get into your panties. Believe me, I know. I've done the same sleight of hand bullshit before. The young blonde burst into tears while shooting up from her chair. She bolted for the door and escaped into the warm summer night, hopefully never to see Mr. Peanut again. Now that's a cock block, I said to Mr. Peanut, staring down at him devilishly. You bastard, he said under his breath. A tidal wave of rage overcame me. I don't know whether it was the frustration of work and Martha, or the macrobiotic rodent in my arms, but I snapped and lost control of myself. I dug the fork deeper into his throat, took out the remaining part of the Slim Jim and demanded that he eat it. No, I won't do it. I swear I'll kill you if you don't. Eat it or else. Mr. Peanut bit off a piece of the beef stick, chewed it like a cow munching on grass and then swallowed it against his better judgment. What are you doing to that man? Martha screamed. Martha frantically pulled me off of the weasel. I took Martha by the hand, throwing a FTY dollar bill on our table and making a fast exit from the cafe. I knew the police were probably already on their way and I was easily looking at assault charges, never mind having a biological weapon of mass intestinal destruction in my possession, namely the Slim Jim, so I moved quickly and stealthily until we were back at the car. 132. No wife, no kids, no plan. This is it, Martha said as tears trickled down her face. I can't see you anymore. You need help. That man in there was a sicko, Martha. I was doing that girl a favor. It doesn't matter. Nothing does anymore. There's something obviously wrong with you and I don't want any part of it anymore. As I stood on the side of the road leaning up against my car, I made a half-hearted attempt to look sad, but not enough that it would help to change Martha's mind. I was greatly relieved at being spared the usual break-up routine and felt a spark of life in myself that I hadn't felt in a long time. I had, Nally, been given an out with Martha. With watery eyes and a saddened gaze, Martha took notice of the full moon positioned high above us and said, "After you get medical attention, maybe we can be friends." She wiped her tears with her palm and straightened her blouse. I hated to see women cry and I hated making them cry even more, but I resisted comforting her for fear of falling back into the boyfriend zone. "I'm sorry," I told her. "Me too," she said. I stared down into the glass of a parking meter. Time expired. 9. I returned home and walked Martha to her car. I gave her a 20 for the chicken and said goodbye for what I hoped was forever. She moved in for a hug, but I denied her the full embrace by leaning in with my shoulder as opposed to my full body. I know that hurt her, but I thought it was better than letting her cling to the thought that things could be made better between us in the future. She drove off without uttering another word. I wondered whether Jennifer was still out on the porch, lost in thought and poetry. It was just past 9:30 and I had my doubts that she would still be lingering, but I took a chance anyway and walked the short distance in hopes of hitting pay dirt. Before I could even make out her silhouette in the shadows of the porch's overhang, Jennifer greeted me with a hearty hi and her porcelain smile lit up the darkness of the night like a mouth-shaped ashlight. This time I didn't ask if I could sit down and instead I went directly to the steps and positioned myself next to her, even being so bold as to make sure we were slightly closer than during our previous chats. There was a moment of silence as we took in each other's auras and I suddenly began to connect with her on a level I didn't even know existed until that evening. Hoping to continue our connection building, I asked her if she ever considered publishing her writing, but she told me that it would be an impossible feat because she always threw away her poems after finishing them. Why put in the work if you're just going to toss them away? I asked her. 133. 134. No wife, no kids, no plan. A poem has a place in time and once it is, Nish, there is no use for it anymore. When a bird loses a feather, it grows a new one. It doesn't try to salvage its loss, but instead, moves forward and continues to. Why? I told Jennifer I didn't understand where she was coming from, but she was glad that I was interested and proceeded with great enthusiasm to explain what she meant. Had this been any other girl, I would have agreed with her for the sake of agreeing, because in reality, I wouldn't have cared. With Jennifer, I genuinely did care to know the answer and discover the girl. You see, a poem, well, my poems, at least, they're like a combination to a safe. Each has many turns and different directions, but I've found through experience that you can only use that combination once. If I write a poem this evening and then turn around and read it tomorrow morning, it will already be outdated, misplaced, and for me, ill-conceived. I was shocked by what I had just heard. Jennifer could easily have been the second coming of Emily Dickinson, and yet all of her writings were winding up in the trash. Artists by nature are often fueled by ego, and more often than not, they crave validation for their works, whether it be a novel, a painting, or in this case, a poem. But here was someone, a beautiful, hour of a woman, who seemed devoid of ego and interested only in the healing power of her words, which is what tempted me to ask her about what she had locked in her safe. The safe is empty, she told me. Inside is a hidden world. What is that world like? I asked, now more curious than ever to find out what made Jennifer tick. Well, that's something I can never describe in words. I only write about that which brings me there, because words, at least by definition, could never truly describe the beauty. Drago. Doug Green. 135. I didn't understand and didn't pretend to. She was a complex girl, and she knew it. What she didn't know was that her complexity was winning me over and that I longed to be complex myself. Will you read me a poem one day? I asked, with a slight pinch of begging thrown in for good measure. I would be happy to, though it will have to be the right piece, and you mustn't stand in my way when I choose to discard it afterwards. I agreed to her terms, eagerly anticipating the day that I could hear her recite her own words of poetry. I was genuinely interested in her work, and how could I not be? What she said had such a ring of truth to it, and at the same time she managed to turn an explanation of poetry into poetry itself. Her selection of words and dreamy delivery knocked me off my center. I had prepared a few funny lines to make her laugh, but my mood had turned meditative and lethargic. I wanted to find out more. Why can't a combination be used twice? I asked her. The magic is all in the present. On paper, they are just words. It's their timing that means everything. Why write down anything at all? By putting into words what I'm seeing or feeling, everything becomes magnified, and my understanding awakens. Next, my imagination adds a brush stroke or two to the mix. For example, the simple green color on the leaf mixed with sunlight suddenly becomes green electricity, and the wavering blade of grass in the wind is nature's hand inviting me to follow. All the elements come together to form a story, or the combination. They are the entrance to the hidden world. For me, the next day they are just memories, used up moments of time. Unfortunately, that doesn't do anything for me, Drago, and while I understand and appreciate that some people look to the written word for answers, I look to the moment. The 136. No wife, no kids, no plan. Words were written as opposed to the words themselves. So you see, that's why I throw my poems away. While she seemed sincere in her explanation, I didn't totally buy Jennifer's take on her craft, and I knew there was something deeper at play, something she didn't want to let out of its cage. She had been open with me about a lot of things since I had met her, but her defensive walls still stood tall around one particular piece of her life. In talking of her poetry, however, I had noticed a sense of relief in her, like she had wanted to share this part of herself with someone for a long time, but had yet to find a person willing to listen. I was more than willing to step up and be that person. Needless to say, I was completely blown away both by Jennifer and her inner spiritual side that seemed to drive her. I had no similar experience or inner beauty on which to connect with Jennifer, yet for some reason I sensed her pulling towards me like a magnet to metal. Her poetry was like a religion to her and she practiced every day, a committed follower to her own beliefs. I could tell that she was reaching some higher plane, some heightened state of consciousness, and it was all natural and self-taught, something very foreign to me. "Can you teach me?" I asked her. Jennifer took the potted plant I had given her in her hands and studied it for a few moments. She pointed out that the leaf was in the shape of a circle and then brought to my attention a vertical line that split the leaf into two halves. I tried to follow her, a studious pupil in awe of his teacher, but I was lost in the indirectness of it all. "What does that mean?" I asked. "In a circle, you can come back to the same point, but in a line, that cannot happen," she told me in an almost clairvoyant tone. "Lines are in motion and circles are complete. They are all signatures of nature." Doug Green. 137. I started to wonder if she, RST, retreated inward because of the harsh realities of her world. Perhaps there was something that happened to her in her youth that shaped her into the sage-like person she had become, but when I saw the depth and understanding in her explanation, I realized that she was more than just a hurt little girl scared to see the world for what it is. No, it was the rest of us that allowed the negativity and skepticism of our daily lives to consume us, only to blind ourselves from the beauty that was everywhere. Jennifer was plugged into this beauty, inhabiting a world that most people, including myself, would never see and could never fathom. She was no simple daydreamer, but instead somebody with a mathematical and innate understanding of the unseen world that few of us will ever even acknowledge. "Can you tell me what other circles there are in nature, Drago?" she asked me. I thought long and hard for a moment. "Bird nests are circles," I responded. "And actually, they can have eggs in them from time to time, which are almost circles. I should get a gold star or something for getting a circle within a circle." Jennifer laughed for the RST time since I sat down. "So what does all of this circle stuff mean?" I asked her. "The circles are a part of a big jigsaw puzzle and the fun comes in, figuring out their placement for yourself. I don't think I'll ever put it all together, but if I do, I'll let you know." She smiled at me and an eerie feeling rolled over me. Although I knew Jennifer wasn't talking down to me, it was obvious that she had superior knowledge of herself and beyond. I always felt that this department was my expertise, but now I see that I was misguided in thinking I knew the answers. I fully understood that people were under a spell of self-deception and that they believed their own lies. I always knew or didn't know who I was, and it's what I always believed helped separate me from the rest of the herd. In fact, I 138. No wife, no kids, no plan. Always believed that it gave me an edge over people, but now I was exposed as a false prophet of knowledge and I found myself in uncharted waters with Jennifer. Jennifer sensed that a conversation was going on in my head and she asked me what I was thinking. "Oh, just that oranges, pupils, the sun, and manhole covers are all circles," I responded. "I'm probably going to get into a see accident now because I'll be seeing circles in everything." "I wouldn't want that to happen," she said, smiling in her own mildly irritacious way. I loved to see Jennifer smile and laugh and wished she did it more. It gave me a sense of security knowing that she was here on Earth with me. I almost felt her poetry was competition, yet I knew also that this was the engine behind her dreaminess, an undeniable charge that was drawing me closer to her. I decided everything was getting a touch too cerebral and took a chance and asked Jennifer if she wanted to take a walk and get an ice cream cone with me. She agreed, informing me that she would have to go inside to get her wallet because she didn't like to keep money on her, seeing the neighborhood could be a dangerous place if you didn't play your cards right. "You don't have to worry about money," I told her. "I think I can afford to buy you an ice cream cone." "Okay, but I'm buying next time." "Do you have to tell your aunt that you leaving?" "I'm a grown woman, Drago," she said with a smile. I'm not required to tell my aunt my comings and goings. We started off down the street in search of a frozen treat. You never talk about your aunt, I said as we made our way down Oak. Doug Green. 139. I only see her at meals, Jennifer responded. She works during the day and watches television all night long, so outside of an occasional discussion over dinner, we hardly ever speak to each other. I could tell Jennifer was uncomfortable talking about her family, so I switched gears in hopes of not coming off as pushy. It was a crisp summer night, the moon was full, resting silently in the sky, and more than anything I wanted the moment to be perfect. When we arrived at the corner of Main Street, I spotted a pair of yellow pants embroidered with alligators stumbling towards me. It was the same wino who helped himself to the putra, Ed meat sitting in my refrigerator, and I couldn't believe my eyes that he was not only alive, but seemingly as a drunken, dull. In fact, from a distance he looked like a distinguished preppy just set free from Harvard, but upon closer inspection he came off more like a middle-aged blue blood, half-cocked and with a trigger temper. "Hey," the drunkard screamed at me. "You're that guy with the bubbly wine. After I left your place, I puked my guts out for hours. That booze you gave me had laundry detergent in it." I tried to ignore him, hoping Jennifer would think he was an incoherent lush with a knack for ruining romantic moments. Unfortunately, the monogrammed shirt gave me away and there was no dodging the incoming vagabond. "Hey, buddy," he continued beckoning as he walked closer. "I want my clothes back, too. Nobody gives me any money when I'm wearing this stupid you gave me." In all honesty, there was a part of me that felt really bad for the wino. Not only did I nearly poison him, but I had obviously severely diminished his earning capacity by giving him an that made it appear like he had just walked off of the golf course while making his weekly rounds at a prestigious country club. Both the pants and the shirt were of the highest quality, so I'm sure it was going to take at least a year for the embroidered alligators and 140. No wife, no kids, no plan. Monogrammed initials to decompose, no matter how many dirty underpasses the guy slept under. I had clearly pecked away at his income by making him a well-dressed bum, so in a moment of weakness that found me feeling sympathetic to his begging cause, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a $100 bill, thrusting it into his dirty, stained hand. "Gee, thanks, mister," the wino said, looking down at the $100 bill in awe. "I'd say God bless you, but I don't believe in any of that religious jazz." When the tipsy hundred-aire left, headed for a nearby liquor store, I told Jennifer that he was the true bohemian wino I had ever encountered. I walked through the story of how he had stopped by unannounced earlier today and how I had given him the pants and shirt. I even gave her the history of the pants themselves and how they were given to me by Rooster. She didn't seem interested in any of my story, but instead wanted to know what my definition of a bohemian was. To me, a bohemian is somebody that is unconventional, usually with morals and a lifestyle different from the rest of society. "Are you a bohemian, Drago?" Jennifer asked me. "No," I said, kicking a rock along the sidewalk. "I like to think that I don't belong to any particular group of people. I'm my own clique." "I can understand that. You are always so confident, but at the same time, not cocky. It's just a role that I learned long ago to play on the world stage. You see, most people actually believe they are the person in the role they are playing, but for me, I at least know it's an act. I may be fooling other people, but I'm not fooling myself." "Do you ever play any roles with me?" she asked, using the most serious tone I had ever heard the dreamy girl take with me. Doug Green. 141. I stopped walking and looked at Jennifer intently and said, "Of course not. I would never do that. You're the only one and myself being myself around." "Good. I would never want you to be someone else. Let's make a vow to be honest with ourselves and with each other." That sounds like an agreement I can stand behind, I told her as I once again started up our walk. A lot of times, roles are just survival tools for me and I use them to get through a scenario or situation that presents itself. It's a world based on Darwinism, Jennifer. Survival of the fittest and all of that good stuff. I just always thought it was necessary to do what you had to in order to make it to the finish line. Even though I tried to reassure Jennifer, it was clear that my playful indiscretions bothered her. Don't ever play games with me, Drago, she warned sternly. I raised my right hand towards the sky and made a scout's honor pledge to Jennifer that I would never play games with her unless the game in question involved a board, tiny playing pieces and a set of dice. Drago, can I be upfront with you about something? Jennifer asked me, looking me square in the eye. Of course, I replied, though concerned about what she was going to tell me. I don't like how you use people for your entertainment. I don't think it's right. I don't do it to be mean, I said, hoping I could reassure her that my motives were not dastardly. Sometimes it's just hard for me to make sense of this absurd world of ours, and for me, humor helps to keep things balanced. I mock myself, the rich, a drunkard, whoever and whatever. Everybody and everything is open game. 142. No wife, no kids, no plan. People are not game, she said sternly. And you just can't go around all the time making a mockery of life. Jennifer seemed agitated since the incident with the wino and couldn't let go of whatever it was that was pecking at her from the inside. I imagined that she thought of me as an outsider who had come to the neighborhood only to belittle the locals and their problems, but really, that was not me. If she thought of me as a snob, then it was my own fault because I must had given her the wrong impression somewhere along the way. Perhaps she thought I was some kind of bohemian, and if so, it was apparent that she didn't like that cut of cloth. Okay, I'll admit it, I told her. I probably was a little too tough on the wino with the alligator pants, but I genuinely do like the guy. Drago, you have a good heart and I love the clown in you, but there are some things that I don't like about you. Her words cut like tiny knives and I found myself slightly hurt, and so I lobbed one back in Jennifer's direction. Well, there are some things that I don't like about you as well. Jennifer stared at me long and hard, and in that moment I saw two faces to her, a dreamer teased by her peers and a tough hood girl. What don't you like about me, Drago? Well, for one, you are this dreamy dreamer and you don't seem to have any real dreams. You don't want to leave this place, you don't want to, be a prince. You don't seem to want anything in this world. Jennifer continued to stare at me and I could tell by looking into her eyes that she was not upset. If anything, I believe she welcomed me challenging her, and she responded in a calm demeanor. Doug Green. 143. I don't need to have a future to make me happy, she declared proudly. The present is enough for me. The moment is, by me. It is what it is and I make the best of it. But I don't understand. Aren't you searching for anything in this world? Is being too content a good thing? I mean, do you just want to go through life in your own series of present moments? I have my reasons for living the way I do, she told me, her voice cracking slightly. I prefer not to be under the spell of dreams that will never happen. That way there are no disappointments or frustrations and I can be at peace. Dreams can come true, but you have to make them happen. You have to have a say in your destiny. Like you did by moving here, Drago. You came here because you thought the grass was greener on the other side. Well, was it, or did you, find out that you were mistaken once you got up close? I abruptly stopped on the sidewalk and turned to Jennifer. No, no. Up close is where I found you, Jennifer. You are the find of a lifetime. Jennifer was stunned, and admittedly, so was I. I have never been big on sharing my feelings, but with Jennifer it was almost impossible to hide them. Why would you like a girl that has no dreams? She asked, her words drenched in insecurity. You have dreams, everyone does. I just don't think you're sharing them with me. Drago, we just met. You are looking for something in your life right now, and if you ask me, I think I'm the girl that just happened to be in your path, which is making you think that it's me that you were looking for. I'm probably not that person you imagine me to be. That's not true, I said passionately. All I have to do is just look at you or hear your voice or even think about you and I 144. No wife, no kids, no plan. Just no. This has never happened to me before. I know that you are very special. But what does it matter anyway, right? You said yourself that you didn't want to get involved with anybody. Jennifer thought for a moment and I could tell she was sizing up my sincerity. Perhaps she was thinking that there may be more than just mockery on my mind. She looked at me with truthful eyes and squeezed my hand. I never said I wasn't open to meeting my prince. I just need to know that I can trust him. I smiled at Jennifer, acknowledging this new understanding we had with each other, and we resumed our walk. And by the way, in terms of the grass being greener here, there is no grass, I said jokingly to lighten the mood. No, but there's a clown, she responded with a smile. Can I ask you a serious question? Sure. Do you ever think you could just take off? You know, uproot and leave and go live in a new place? I mean, I know you are content here, but could you do it if the situation was right? I have nothing holding me here, Drago, she said. If it felt right, I would do it. Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Further down Main Street, Jennifer pointed out a concrete building with cracks that wound up the foundation like an overgrown series of vines. She told me that the building once housed her dentist, but that the tooth doctor in question made the smart move and packed up shop for greener pastures in the suburbs. A few buildings down was a second-hand clothing shop that she also made a point to single out. She said it used to be a musical instruction school called the Music Center, and that her aunt, the one she lived with, would take her there at least twice a week for piano lessons. She claimed to have liked tickling the ivories, but stopped after Junior Doug Green. 145. High school, never to play again. We walked by a group of young African American men hanging out on the street corner, and I said hello as we passed by them. A block later, Jennifer turned around to make sure they were not following us, and then she turned to me. It's best to keep a low profile, and leave who you are to the imaginations of the people around these parts, Drago, she told me. For instance, I would suggest not throwing around $100 bills to homeless people. Flashing money like that will get you into trouble. This isn't Wall Street, Drago. It was obvious that growing up in the neighborhood had forced Jennifer to take on her fair share of hardened street smarts, and it was equally as obvious that I was a rookie. How does a dreamy poet from the hood know about Wall Street? I asked. Never judge a book by its cover, she said. I do accounting for my boss, and he has an extensive portfolio of stocks and mutual funds. Like you, I've been known to take on a few roles myself. We reached our ice cream shop destination and went inside, where the tiny parlor restaurant was, LLED, with mostly high-schoolaged hoodlums with nowhere else to go. I eyeballed the offerings on the large wooden board and decided on a 2-scoop sugar cone with chocolate chip ice cream. What do you want? I asked her. Oh, I'm not a big ice cream person, but I'd love a scoop of orange sherbet in a cup. One orange sherbet coming up. I placed our order with a 20-something woman dressed in a white smock covered in splotches of multicolored ice cream left over from a day's worth of scooping. We waited minutes for the 2 treats to return, and I paid for them with a 10, telling the overworked and underpaid ice cream shop girl to keep the change. 146. No wife, no kids, no plan. We exited the shop and took in the night air as we licked and spooned the frozen sweets into our mouths. So let me get this straight, I said. I ask you to get some ice cream and you agree, only you don't even like ice cream. That's right, she said. We need to start communicating better, I smiled. And what would you like to communicate with me about, Drago? I looked at Jennifer softly as she stood there with a tiny dab of orange sherbet smudged on the corner of her mouth and said, I want to communicate that I really like you. I wish I had a better way of conveying it, but I have an ice cream headache right now and that's the best I can come up with. Jennifer laughed and melted at the same time. I had broken down her defenses even more with my impromptu comment and we hugged on the sidewalk, two blossoming lovers set against a backdrop of ugliness and poverty. We were now the unseen beauty on Main Street and I felt all sorts of emotions well up inside of me. As we embraced, I saw a ash of my future and for the rst time since I lost my childlike lust for life, I saw more than a black wall waiting for me down the road. For the rst time I saw possibility. I held Jennifer's hand and it, so naturally next to mine, two connecting pieces in a puzzle built on potential. I welcomed the warmth of her gentle touch and she squeezed me, a moment that sent my heart skipping like a stone across a motionless lake. The walk home was slow. I wanted to savor every second of it and I sensed she felt the same way. When we, Nally did reach her porch steps, I asked her if I could take her to lunch the following day and she agreed, responding with her work address and the time she could take an hour break. I hugged her once more, wanting to hold her in my arms until sunrise, and when I saw that she was safely inside, I went home a different person. 10. In the morning I woke and climbed into the shower, letting the water run over me until it went cold. Even after I turned it off, I found myself standing there, still not fully awake to the world around me. The night had delivered romantic dreams as I lay unconscious and even though I couldn't recall the details, I felt their remnants lingering like the path of white exhaust a jet airplane leaves on the sky's canvas long after it's gone. That day I was scheduled to have my lunch date with Jennifer and I wanted to look sharp and leave her with a good impression. I removed a pair of black dress slacks from my closet and ironed a perfect set of pleats into them. I matched the pants with a light blue polo shirt because women had often complimented me on the color's ability to bring out my eyes, which were a similar shade of blue. I readied my black cowboy boots and opted for a pair of gold toe socks because matching socks had long been an important accessory in my life. In fact, I remember trying to match socks all sleep-eyed in my pre-gold toe days and the disastrous end results. I'd end up with one brown sock and one black sock secured over my feet and sure enough, I would have a bad morning and it would prompt me to return home on my lunch break in order to make a hose change. Mrs. Fasano was standing on her walkway in oversized black sneakers pressing a TV remote to her head and looking up at the crystal clear, blue sky. Good morning, Mrs. Fasano. 147. 148. No wife, no kids, no plan. She looked down at the tip of my cowboy boot which had some scratches on it. He's a vampire, she said. We know what he is. Who is a vampire, Mrs. Fasano? Mrs. Fasano looked over at Jimmy's yard. He was washing all the blood off. Oh, you mean when Jimmy was doing his dishes with the garden hose? This sent Mrs. Fasano into what I can only describe as a spaz attack. She was practically going airborne, jumping up and down and shouting in a granny voice, "He's a vampire! He's a vampire!" She ran over to the fence and I noticed that there was garlic all over it. She was putting the pieces that had fallen on the ground back on the fence. Goodbye, Mrs. Fasano. Have a nice day, I told her. I got into my car with a fresh outlook on life. I stopped and ordered a small Jamaican nut blend of some kind from a Starbucks drive-through window. I decided that I was going to be proactive and make my day a positive one by approaching it with a bit of enthusiasm. After all, I was due to have lunch with Jennifer later that day, so what reason did I have to be down in the dumps? I was sitting behind my desk waiting for my desktop to load on my computer when Rooster poked his head, lead by his nose, into my CE. Some guys at the front desk asking for you, babes, he informed. He looks like a temp from the Salvation Army. That must be Louis. Hawaii. He's a friend of mine. Please, babes, tell me you're not going to hire this guy, Rooster pleaded. Doug Green. 149. Nothing long term. Only for an hour. He's going to take care of the radioactive waste that we had stored in our bathroom. Always looking at the price tag on everything, Rooster asked without skipping a beat, how much we paying him? $200, plus a little gas money. Is this guy bonded? Rooster inquired. Not very well, I admitted. Have him sign a release, Rooster said as he walked away. I'll send him down to see you so we can get him out of our waiting room. He's scaring people. Louis hesitantly stepped into my CE. He looked as nervous as a kindergartner on his RST day of school and continually wiped sweat from his forehead. Nice CE, Louis said. You should just live here instead of in that house of yours. Louis pulled a stiff handkerchief from his pocket and blew his nose loudly. It was a wet, mucousy blow, and I now understood why the handkerchief was stiff in the RST place. Okay, he said, wiping excess snot from his upper lip. Let's get this show on the road. I told Louis to sit and then slid him a standard release that we gave to all temporary employees. What's this? Louis asked. It's a release form that basically states, if anything bad should happen to you while you're working for us, it's not our fault, and instead, it's yours. It's a standard form we use with everyone as a way of protecting the company from trigger-happy people looking to sue. Not that you're that guy, it's just a formality we have to go through. Are you sure this stuff is safe that I'm moving out of here? Rooster popped his head in the CE, obviously eavesdropping from outside the door. 150. No wife, no kids, no plan. Don't worry, old man, he said to Louis. If some of it gets on you, it will keep your pecker nice and hard. Louis signed the release and Rooster escorted him to a storage closet where the canisters were now being stored. Bob helped Louis carry the green biohazard bins to the infamous station wagon as Rooster supervised. After the radioactive material was loaded and ready to go, Louis returned to my CE to collect his money. We'll send you a check, Rooster told him. Check? Louis cried. I don't have a checking account. Nobody said anything about no check. Don't worry, Louis, I assured him. We'll take care of you. I turned to Bob, who was wheezing in the doorway, and said, get $200 out of petty cash. And don't forget the 10 for gas, chimed in Louis. That's right. Make it 210, Bob. Bob scurried off and returned with the money. We paid Louis and he left on his mission to dispose of the radioactive waste that had been infiltrating our men's room. This just cost us some money, Bob, Rooster angrily said. Next time you bring shit into the men's room, ush it down the stinking toilet. It's not rocket science. A fucking moron could, gore it out. Bob left with watery eyes as Rooster took a seat in my CE, stretching his legs far out in front of him. Where did you, Andy, that Louis, babes? He's something right out of an episode of Law and Order. He's in my neighborhood all of the time. I've been meaning to talk to you about that, babes, he said, leaning forward and resting his elbows on my desk. I'm a bit worried about you lately. Everybody's talking about your move to that dump. Is everything okay? I got up and closed my CE door so that we could have a little privacy. Being proactive in my day, I decided that it was time to be Doug Green. 151. RM with Rooster and tell him that I was leaving the company for good. Seeing as he wouldn't listen to the real reason that I wanted to quit and leave it all behind, I made up some ridiculous bullshit about wanting to move away and be closer to nature. Nature, he squealed. Why don't you buy yourself a treehouse in Natick? I'll send a limousine to pick you up every morning. I don't think so, Rooster. It's time for me to move on. Why don't you plan a trip to the French Riviera and take some time to clear your head? You can walk around with no clothes on for a while and reconnect with your pre-upright self. Not what I had in mind. What about that girl you've been seeing, he asked, desperation, ling his face. You're just going to leave what's her name behind in the dust. Martha and I broke up yesterday. Rooster stood up and paced around my CE. He rubbed his chin furiously. I was causing him a boatload of stress, but I had to do what was right for me for once. She was no good for you anyway, he said. What you need is one of those Cambridge, earthy crunchies to lick your balls, and I'll tell you what, babes, you're not going to, nd one of those out in nature. You're probably right, Rooster, but I've been searching for something here for a long time and I've been unable to, nd it. It's time to look elsewhere. What are you going to, nd out in nature that you can't, nd here? It's the same everywhere you go. There's nowhere to run, babes. I don't know. It might just be one of those things that I have to discover for myself. Rooster froze and pointed at me like he was the host of a game show and I just won a new car. 152. No wife, no kids, no plan. I've got it, he screamed. I'm going to call up my wife and have her hook you up with her friend Jill. Trust me when I say this. She's the thing you've been looking for. That girl will give you some serious memory loss and she'll make you feel like you've found what you've lost. I'm calling over there right now. Rooster rushed out of my CE before I could say no and stop the sale from happening. I had just begun to check my messages when my cell phone rang. It was Mikey. What's up, Mikey? I got a free trial membership at this new high-end health club and I can bring a guest. You want to check out the hip hop aerobics class with me tonight? Hip hop aerobics? Yeah, man. Trust me. It's nothing but women. It's like, shing for carp in a barrel. Actually, I'm trying to be somewhat proactive today and I could use a little exercise. Count me in. When were you thinking of going? There's a class at 6 and another at 8 and either work for me. I'm off today. Let's play it by ear because I have a few appointments in the early afternoon that may run late, but whichever one we hit up, I'm driving, I told him, fearful of ever stepping foot in a car where Mikey was behind the wheel again. Oh, and before I forget. I know you've been having some money problems and that got me thinking. I have a phone call I need made and I'll pay you $100 if you do it for me. You'll pay me $100 to make a phone call? Yeah, I need to do a follow-up on that billboard deal you helped me out with. You have a rough voice and the goal is to get the guy who owns them to shit a few bricks in his pants so he won't go stepping on our territory again. The guy's name is Mr. Bratton and he's Doug Green. 153. Over at Moakley Advertising. It's in the book. I need you to call him up and say that you're Mr. Franconi from the city papers. Tell him that he has 24 hours to take back all the free ad offers he made or next time it's going to be more than just his billboards that get a facial. Make sure you say that with your best OSO voice. Make it sound really scary like you've got mob ties or something. Can you do that? Yeah, I can make that call, he said. And you're going to give me $100 just for doing that. It's an important part of my plan, and I'm convinced you'll scare the excrement out of him just enough to make him back down. Okay. I'll drive to the payphone down on Eddy Street and make the call right now. Sounds good, Mikey, I told him. I'll pay you later when I pick you up to hit the gym. I hung up my cell phone and placed it down on my desk. I was already feeling a million times better than the day before and I knew the prospect of seeing Jennifer meant it was only going to get better. I was halfway through my messages when Rooster burst back into my CE. You're all hooked up for tomorrow night with Jill, he informed me. I'll get you directions to her house so you can swing by and pick her up in that ride of yours. And believe me, you'll thank me later for this. I'm not sure I'm all that interested in going out on this forced date, Rooster. Just do me this one favor before you ride off into the sunset. Please. That's all I ask. Give true love one shot at blossoming in hopes that you'll stick around and keep me from going insane here without you. 154. No wife, no kids, no plan. I agreed to go out on the date with his wife's friend Jill because I felt bad for leaving Rooster to fend for himself at the paper. I knew that I was gone no matter what, so anything I could do to soften the blow would help to keep our friendship intact. Listen to this, Rooster said, ipping through a magazine that sat on my desk. I just interviewed a recent grad who thought he wanted to get into sales. I asked him why he thought he'd be good at sales and he said because he loves people. So, to counter his romantic approach to the world of selling, I told him that he would have to hate a few people to do this job because it comes with the territory. And you'll never believe what he said to me. Enlighten me. He said that he could never do that and that hate is a terrible thing to have in your heart. Oh. What did you do? Nothing. I just booted his ass out of my CE. Didn't you ever have a RST interview? It wouldn't have hurt you to show the kid a little sympathy. He was probably sweating bullets in that room with you. My RST interview was tits, he said. I went in for this door-to-door sales position selling security alarms. This guy who's interviewing me tossed a gold cross pen into my chest and said, "Sell me this pen." I put the pen in my shirt pocket and told him that the pen wasn't for sale. He said, "That's funny, but I want my pen back." I said no and left the building. So what happened? I asked. He followed me all the way out into the parking lot and I drove off. I kept the pen, babes. It was a nice pen. In sales, either he sells you or you sell him. There's no in between. I wasn't sold on the job or him as a boss, so I left and I took his gold writing penis with me. Doug Green. 155. Rooster then gave me one of his rare serious looks and said, "Everybody in this world is conning everybody else. It's just a question of who's better." As he was leaving my CE, I asked him to send in Harry. 15 minutes passed before I ever saw his face, but when he arrived he seemed in good spirits as opposed to the last time we spoke. I decided that it was important to tell Harry that I was leaving the paper. The tough part of the conversation was going to be convincing him to stay, especially after convincing him to leave yesterday. If the paper stood a chance of surviving in its current form, there needed to be a general in place that rose up through the ranks. For all of his faults and complaints, Harry was good at what he did when he put his mind to it, and I felt as though I had the right amount of ammunition going into battle to convince him to stay on board with Rooster. One of the reasons that the paper has grown to the level it had was because of the quality of stories that showed up in its pages. That was Harry's doing, and I made sure to thank him for all of his hard work before moving any further into my plans. If Rooster got a hold of the editorial department, it would have meant a quick and painful death for the paper, so keeping Harry in the driver's seat was important. Ded in my old friend, spilling my guts about everything I planned to do, but was always too afraid to reach out and grab. He seemed relieved when I told him that I was going to be resigning because it meant that he could now quit without any unwanted guilt, but when I offered him half of my equity in the company to stay, I could see his mind churning as new possibilities presented themselves for his future. He knew he would probably never get a chance to make a substantial amount of money like this again. "I'll have to think about it," he told me. 156. No wife, no kids, no plan. Of course, I said. Take your time, but I just wanted you to know where I stood and where you could stand if you stick around. Oh, and Harry, keep this between us for now, okay? Nobody really knows that I'm going to be leaving besides Rooster. Sure. My lips are sealed. Harry was nightly tempted by the offer, even though he knew that Rooster would still rule over him. The only way Harry could be on even playing with Rooster would be if he was an equal partner, which was what I planned. I just didn't want to tell Harry that. At least not yet. 11. I left my CE just before the lunch rush in order to meet Jennifer at her place of employment. It was located just off of a main artery on a street that was home to mostly multi-family homes and an old cemetery that dated back to the Revolutionary War. It was quieter in this part of town than what I had grown accustomed to from being a resident of Oak Street, and it was a nice, tranquil start to what I hoped to be an incredible bite to eat with Jennifer. I parked the car and heard Pop Goes the Weasel blaring behind me. I turned to, Andy, not an ice cream truck, but Clea working her money maker on the sidewalk as a group of horny men pawed at her. I walked by the noisy hooker and made eye contact. She waved me over, pushing the men to the side. "This idea of yours is working great," she told me enthusiastically. "Had I known this shit was the way to making money, I'd have gotten myself a theme song long ago." "Good," I said to her, noticing that her lip pustule had taken on an almost frighteningly large metamorphosis. "I'm glad it's working out for you. It's workin' so ballsin' good that Mr. Pops himself was threatenin' to sue my ass. I told that cocksucker that he didn't own no rights to Pop Goes the fucking Weasel. Give me a fucking break, right? You're safe, I'm sure," I told her. "That song doesn't belong to anybody, so just keep doing your thing." "You're damn right I will, and ain't nobody gonna tell me what to do." 157. 158. No wife, no kids, no plan. I left Mrs. Pops to business and soon found the building that Jennifer's store was located in and noticed a sign that read, "Gold's Arty, Chail Limbs." I could see why Jennifer called them medical supplies instead of specifying the exact variety. I walked into the store and was greeted by an old man that resembled Geppetto, the father of the wooden boy who learned that lying wasn't a good route to take. Dressed in overalls and twirling a white mustache with his engers, the man that seemed to be torn from the pages of a children's fairy tale asked if he could help me. "I'm just browsing," I responded. "And browsing for what, can I ask? I see you have all of your working parts, so you can't be in here looking for a replacement." "No," I admitted, smiling at old man that looked better suited in the role of a cobbler than as a medical supply salesman. "I'm actually here to see Jennifer. I'm taking her to lunch this, any sunny day." "I know. Sit down. She's just, nishing up a few things. I'm Mr. Gold, by the way. As in Gold's Arty, Chail Limbs. One and the same. I'm Drago." Mr. Gold snickered underneath the protection of his snowy white mustache. "So why do you live in that Meshuggah house?" he asked. Mr. Gold looked at me suspiciously as I did my best to look inconspicuous in the wake of his forward question. He asked if I was Meshuggah, and when I told him that I didn't know what that was, he explained to me that it was a Yiddish word meaning crazy. I assured him that I wasn't and that the house had a certain amount of romantic appeal to me. "That sounds Meshuggah to me," he said, before going into a number of stories about how he had lived in the neighborhood for 60 Doug Green 159 VE years and how his business was the only one never to be robbed. What would they do with an arty, chail limb, slap each other on the backs for a job well done? I laughed at the old man, who admitted his sense of humor was just as vibrant now as it was when he was 20 years old. He told me how beautiful the neighborhood once was all those years ago when he was a boy, and how you could have eaten off of the sidewalks at one point because it was so clean. I was going to inform him that people were still eating off the sidewalks regardless of how dirty they were, but I thought it better to sit back and let him spew his stories. After a few more minutes of walking down memory lane, Mr. Gold started in with the interrogation, asking me questions about my life. He asked me if I went to college and I told him yes. He asked me about my business and he seemed genuinely impressed when I went into my work history, but at the same time he questioned my motives for being a successful businessman living in a part of town that most sought to avoid. "So what is a man such as yourself doing living there?" he blurted out. "I needed a change," I said. "I needed something that I couldn't, and in the suburbs." "Sounds Meshuggah to me, but you seem nice." I just hope you are a good man underneath all of the niceness you give off. Jennifer is a special girl and I wouldn't want to see anything bad happen to her. I assured Mr. Gold that my intentions were honorable and that he had nothing to worry about. That was the RST time I had ever said something along those lines and actually meant it, and that alone was a giant leap forward for me in terms of my personal dealings in relationships. Though I had only known her a few days, Jennifer was someone I wanted to explore a true romance with to the maximum. What did it mean to give yourself to someone? 160 No wife, no kids, no plan. Completely. That was an answer I had yet to discover in life, but I had a feeling that I was closer to ending it out for myself than I had ever been before. Jennifer appeared from the back of the arty, Chael Lim store wearing a gigantic smile, a white lace top with pink trim, and a pair of slim black jeans that hugged her body like a second skin. The out-tee complemented her feminine side without being overly sexy, and that alone made her more appealing. She had the ability to ignite a inside me, and she did it without the help of the usual trappings that I've come to expect from women: cleavage, skin, sluttiness, and more cleavage. Jennifer was herself and I loved her for that. "Hey," I said to her, genuinely happy to see her again. "Hey to you too," she responded. We exited the shop and stepped out onto the sidewalk where we were warmly welcomed by the ultimate summer day. The temperature sat at a comfortable location on the thermometer and the sun hung pressed against a cloudless canvas of blue. I thought about saying something clever about the weather, but all I could come up with were worn-out clichés that would have just dulled the moment. Jennifer froze when we made it outside, plugging herself into the world and choosing to take in every piece of her surroundings, from those of Mother Nature, to those built by man. She connected to everything in a way that I thought impossible. She was grounded, but floating through the atmosphere at the same time, and I stood and watched her, amazed at every wonderful part of her. She made me want to be a better person, and she did it without motivation or without even trying. We started walking, and instead of taking control of the situation like I would have in the past with other girls, I instead concentrated on following her lead. We passed by a Burger King, LLED to the brim with hungry lunchgoers looking to ingest their daily caloric intake. Doug Green. 161. In one sitting. I shivered comically, telling her about a recent traumatic experience I had at a similar fast food establishment. It was last week, I told her. Before I tell you the story, I just wanted to say that in my defense, I didn't get much sleep the night before. "Oh, just tell me," she said, laughing in anticipation. I went through the drive-thru and thought that one of those newfangled garbage cans with the long snout was an ordering window, and I drove up, put down the window and said, "I'll take a number 4 with a Diet Coke." "No you didn't," she said, gasping in embarrassment, covering her mouth with her hands. "Wait," I stopped her. "It gets better." So I sat there for a minute and then another minute until, Nally, the guy behind me, starts honking his horn. I turn back to see what all of the commotion is, and he yells out to me, "Yo, moron, you're talking to the garbage can." Jennifer laughed and said, "I see the clown is out today." I felt my face go, "Ush," but I've been told there's something special about a person that can make fun of and laugh at himself. I must have been the most special person in the world because I did a lot of making fun of myself around Jennifer. "What did you do?" she asked. I drove out of line as fast as I could and hid under my bed for the rest of the afternoon. "Drago, do these things really happen to you?" Well, for the sake of the story I added the whole hiding under the bed part, but the rest is true. I'm a magnet for the absurd. Jennifer lightly poked me in the side with her anger and asked, "Should I be scared about hanging around you then?" "Nah. It keeps life interesting." 162. No wife, no kids, no plan. We entered a sandwich shop that Jennifer couldn't stop raving about and sauntered up to the counter, eyeballing the list of sandwiches on the wall in hopes of deciding what we wanted by the time we were called on to order. With pressure mounting as the line thinned in front of us, I opted to go with something simple that came highly recommended by Jennifer, a turkey wrap with Swiss, banana peppers and honey mustard. She chose the same. After having our meal and a pair of Diet Cokes brown bagged, we left the shop and headed for a nearby park that was known for being dangerous in the evening, but in the day it was LLED, with mostly workers taking a break from the daily grind. As we walked, I reached out and grabbed Jennifer's hand, even though I questioned what her reaction would be when I made the junior high-level move. To my surprise, she actually squeezed my hand, RMLY, in response, and we stayed connected the entire trip to our NAL lunchtime destination. The small park was LLED with litter and did not have the abundance of greenery that you'd expect out of an area of land preserved for public recreation. It wasn't the park's fault that its best assets were a few scattered bushes and a stretch of burned, yellow grass. The city obviously had other places to put their money than an urban woodland setting in a seemingly forgotten block of Boston. There were a few mothers enjoying the outdoors with their children, but mostly the park was LLED with people sitting by themselves, blank stares cemented to their faces. I knew that particular look well because I had it myself every day for ages. It's the look of discontent, work weariness, and detachment. I sympathized with each and every sad face in attendance that day. Jennifer and I found an empty bench spray painted with familiar tags. I had seen that same work on the billboards I had hired Jamal to vandalize, so I knew it was his crew that had left their mark. Doug Green. 163. Behind. We sat and unraveled our sandwiches from their white paper wrappings and, opt between bites and conversation. Mr. Gold asked me a lot of questions when I was in there waiting for you, I told her. He really cares about you. It's unique for a boss to care at all for an employee these days, so you're lucky. He's great, she said. I've been working there for a long time now and he's always been good to me. He calls me the daughter that he's never had, and that means a lot. I can't imagine you get a lot of foot trove, see in there. Yeah, I feel bad. He really doesn't get much business anymore. Doctors are buying directly from the manufacturers on the internet. Why doesn't he just retire? I asked after swallowing a bite. He always says he's going to when one of us has a place to go. So far neither of us has been able to turn that into a reality. I was really falling hard for Jennifer. She poured sincerity into every word she spoke and her eyes sparkled with an energy that even the black hole of the hood around us couldn't extinguish. So, I hope you don't mind, but I've decided to read you one of my poems, she told me. Mind? Are you kidding me? I'd love to hear some of your writing. It's called, The Universe is Bare and Bountiful. Jennifer smiled as if for the first time she felt validated to be a writer. She pulled a folded piece of paper out of the pocket of her black jeans and opened it like a road map. She cleared her throat and began reading at a slow, hypnotic pace. She pronounced each word perfectly, giving individual life to each syllable. A lone green leaf wavered back and forth in the summer breeze. And when the sunlight 164. No wife, no kids, no plan. Buttered the round leaf. Green electricity emerged. And I shut my eyes. Bringing this jade aura to the pitch black canvas. Whereupon the darkness became outer space and white sparkles became stars. The universe was bare and bountiful. She nished her poem and returned the piece of paper to her pocket. That was beautiful, I told her. I wouldn't even try to interpret it because I wouldn't do it justice. It's hard to explain, she said. That's a good thing. In fact, in your case, that's a great thing. Thanks, she said. For what? For initiating conversation with me the other day. I'm happy you came into my life. I'm happy you've accepted me. We sat in silence for a few minutes staring into each other's eyes, letting the romantic silence of two would-be lovers rule the moment. Jennifer then looked like she was about to say something important to me. The day we met, you mentioned your land in Pennsylvania. You said you had no one to share the beauty with. I wanted to tell you that having no one to share my poetry with also made me sad and feel empty, she said as a tear rolled down her cheek. I took Jennifer's hand and told her that she was beautiful. She smiled and the meditative look on her face quickly changed to that of a happy child. So does your car go real fast? She asked enthusiastically. As fast as you want her to go. Doug Green. 165. You're one of those guys that refers to his car as a woman, huh? She's got curves and she knows how to use them, Jennifer. I'd be insulting her if I referred to her as anything else. Could you take me for a ride in her someday? I'd love to see what it feels like to go fast. Absolutely. I'll even promise to get at least one speeding ticket on said ride. Can we go to the ocean? She asked like an excited child. I think I can arrange that. If you're free this Saturday, we can give it a try. I hear it's supposed to be just as beautiful as today. I have no plans. Then we have ourselves a plan, I said as I stared at the wonderful enigma who sat beside me. Jennifer seemed happy being in my company and I adored every moment of my time with her. Her ever-present inner light was awe-inspiring. It was as if she was in a constant dream state and she was totally down to earth at the same time. I was convinced that she could see things normal people couldn't see and I wanted her to help open my eyes to those things. She was as playful as a child and as wise as a sage. I looked up at the sunlight as it glared down from the heavens, lighting up Jennifer's angelic face as if she was the holy grail of girls. She shone like a diamond and I felt the moment overtake me. I moved toward her slowly and gently pressed my lips against hers. Jennifer closed her eyes and I could feel the pressure of her lips on my own. It was innocent, yet exhilarating. Time was growing short and Jennifer needed to get back to work. Also, I was due at my house at 2:00, paying Jamal for the job he did on the Moakley billboards. I walked her back to Mr. Gold's shop and kissed her a second time, once again taking a page out of a pre-teen's book and opting to go the sweet route minus the tongue. I could tell that something wonderful was blossoming right. 166. No wife, no kids, no plan. Before my eyes and I sensed she felt the same thing. I had already begun to count the minutes until our drive to the beach on Saturday. 12. I was back on the porch daydreaming about Jennifer and waiting for Jamal to arrive when my cell phone rang. It was Rooster and it sounded like he had 2 barrels of caffeine pumping through his veins. He was talking 2 miles a minute, 1 mile faster than how I was used to hearing him speak and he seemed to be teetering on the edge of a nervous breakdown. I assumed it was due to my planned departure. Hey, babes, he told me as the phone was pressed against my ear. I just left work early to pick up my kids from school and you wouldn't believe what I'm seeing. Every Moakley billboard I'm seeing is covered in graph, TI, gang tags, and 6-foot-tall curse words. You can't read any of the advertisements. I know, I said, welcoming Rocky as he appeared on the porch to sip from his water bowl. I'll tell you all about it later. Tell me what exactly? Babes, you didn't have something to do with this, did you? It was an investment in the paper's future. Have you been abducted by aliens? I mean, I really don't even know who you are anymore. Is that a bad thing? You've turned into a complete nut job. I'll take that as a compliment, I told him as Rocky eagerly sniffed my empty hand, hoping to end it, LLED with peanuts. Well, don't think we're not going to talk about this Moakley thing later. I want the details of your endish plan because if I 167. 168. No wife, no kids, no plan. Remember correctly, I'm still your partner. And you know how much I hate secrecy. It wasn't a secret, Rooster. I just didn't want it to come back to you. I'll tell you all about it later though. Right now I have to get going because I'm actually meeting the man responsible for the artwork you've seen. I need to pay him for a job well done. Okay, but don't forget about Jill. That's still unlike a carnival, so put on your best shoes. Goodbye, I said, hanging up the phone without letting Rooster get in another word. I was in no frame of mind to think about another woman because Jennifer was occupying all of my gray matter. I would have done anything to get out of my date with Jill, but I felt obligated to Rooster and preferred to keep him happy until I announced my jail leave from the paper. I slipped my cell phone into my pocket and ran into the house to grab a handful of peanuts. I returned to my seated position on the porch and proceeded to stuff Rocky's cheeks with a late afternoon snack. He chose to save them for future feasting and ran off to bury them in his peanut graveyard. Jamal arrived with two of his associates a few moments later. He was wearing a baggy Red Sox shirt, oversized shorts that hung to his ankles, and a black do-rag tied over his head. He scanned the house from top to bottom and waved to his yes men to stay put by the sidewalk. He approached me cautiously, still unsure if he could trust me. "This your house?" he asked. "I don't own it," I said, standing and stretching. "I'm just renting." "What the fuck for?" "Why the fuck not? I'm not even sure you can classify this as a house, homie." Doug Green. 169. It is what it is, I said. "One ahead inside and take care of business. Do it up." Jamal followed me inside as his urban soldiers waited for his return. He snickered at the furnishings of my living room and refused to sit, saying he wouldn't put his ass on anything in the joint. "So how did it go?" I asked. "My boys delivered as promised," he said with pride. "Now where's my money?" I walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator door, pulling a rolled wad of cash from the produce drawer. I threw it to Jamal and he caught it with his right hand. He removed the rubber band from the cash, licked his fingertips, and began counting it to make sure it matched our previously agreed upon amount. "It's all there," I assured him. "Bonus and all." "Maybe so, but if it's all the same to you, homie, I'd like to check for myself." "By all means." As Jamal continued to count, a cockroach sprinted out from a cracked board and began climbing the wall. I reached for the taser gun that Mikey had given me for protection and attempted to shock the insect into submission, but I missed by at least a foot on my RST shot. Without hesitation, Jamal dug into his pants and pulled out a Glock 9mm. He took aim at the scurrying creature and, hitting the bug square in the back with a bullet. The cockroach exploded like a water balloon and the bullet lodged into the wall. "Wow," I said, shocked and genuinely surprised by his marksmanship. "That was one hell of a shot. You want to kill a cockroach, you got to think like a cockroach." 170. No wife, no kids, no plan. I'll have to remember that. "So, are we good?" "Yeah. We're square. You ever got any more business like this, you know where to, ND me." Jamal turned to leave and I inspected the bullet hole in the wall. He had initiative and was a leader, whether he knew it or not. "I'm going to need you when the revolution comes, Jamal." "What revolution?" he blurted out. "Things keep going the way they are, the economy is going to crash and chaos is going to take over. The cities, the towns, and the government are going to go bankrupt. All of the power is going to shift and it's going to shift to the people in the trenches. People like you, Jamal. We're going to need you." Something, if not all of what I said had bored underneath Jamal's skin and he lit up like a furious Christmas tree. "Get your white motherfucker revolution out of my face. You fucking cracker-ass pasties are always using the black man to do your dirty work." Jamal stormed out of the house and I stood thinking about his words. He was obviously extremely intelligent and passionate. I knew it was only a matter of time before we became good friends. After a few beers and a cold shower, I stepped back outside and noticed a small crowd had gathered in front of Jimmy's house. At RST I thought his latest dishwashing antics may have become a spectator sport, but then I saw two policemen and a stuffy man in a white lab coat step out into the open and I knew things were more serious than that. "What's going on?" I asked a man in a tattered brown bathrobe that I had never met before. "There's something green glowing in the guy's grass over there," he told me, pointing to a spot on Jimmy's lawn that had been quarantined with police tape. "I think it's a crop circle. We're foolish to think we're alone in this universe." Doug Green. 171. "I'll take your word for it," I said as I stood on my tiptoes, doing my best to get a better view of the crap circle. "Any idea who the guy in the white coat is?" I heard the red-headed cop say he was with the Board of Health. "That's not a good sign." "Nope, and he brought some kind of portable chemistry set with him too. I had one just like it when I was a kid." I parted the crowd and walked towards Jimmy's driveway where Getman was in mid-discussion with an attractive female police of, Sir. She took notes on a tiny pad as the Nazi-loving Getman spewed out his opinions on Jimmy. "The other day I saw him hosing a glass in just about the same spot as that stuff that was found over there," Getman squealed as if he was being interrogated himself. "He always struck me as an oddball." "Do you have any idea when your neighbor gets home?" the policewoman asked Getman. "Usually about this time actually," Getman proclaimed as he checked his watch. I stepped over to the Sir and asked if I could have a word with her in private. Getman glared at me, suspicious of my motives, but I brushed him off and led the on-duty beauty to an area in front of Mrs. Fazano's house where we could talk without any immediate interruption. "Are you trying to, ND the person that caused this mess?" I asked her. "That's my job," she said in a snippety tone. "Do you have any information on who did it?" "I'm not one to ruff feathers, but I think you may have just been speaking to the person responsible. You got any proof?" 172. "No wife, no kids, no plan. I live a few houses down, so I tend to see a lot of what goes on in front of my house." Getman, the guy you were just talking to, I'm not sure what he does for a living, but from what I've seen, he has a workshop in the basement. There are constantly UPS shipments being made to his house, and all of the boxes that get delivered there always have those biohazard stickers all over them. It's had all of us neighbors a little worried." "And you've seen this?" she asked me, looking for absolute validation before she acted on anything. "With my own two eyes. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the guy's building something seriously dangerous down there. He's not exactly the world's most personable man, and if you hadn't noticed, there are Nazi AGS hanging all over the house." The Sir took a few steps back and whispered something to the man in the white coat that seemed to pique his interest. "It's nightly possible," the Board of Health inspector stated. "I don't know exactly what it is just yet because I still have a few tests to run, but it's nightly a volatile substance." The Sir waved her partner over as two more police cruisers arrived on the scene. More bystanders had gathered and the crowd was blocking the street to the point where oncoming cars couldn't pass through. The female Sir whispered to her partner and they immediately approached Getman. They started aggressively questioning him and the voices grew louder and louder. Getman became defensive and started to back away, but the two Sirs approached cautiously, the woman cop hovering her hand over her still-sheathed baton. Getman began shouting at his accusers and within seconds a scov broke out. The crowd of onlookers roared like the audience at a professional wrestling event. The male cop tackled Getman to the ground, trying to subdue him long enough to shackle his wrists with a pair of shiny handcuffs. Getman fought hard, however, hopping around like a SH and Doug Green. 173. Ailing his arms and legs like a spoiled child who didn't get what he wanted at the toy store. He was about as spastic as his savage dog, who at this point was going ballistic, chained to a tree as he watched his owner sit on the receiving end of a little justy, ed police brutality. It wasn't long before the woman Sir got into the fray, beating Getman with her now freed baton. He defended himself well, but a third Sir ran in to make an assist, stomping Getman in the head and knocking him senseless so that they could restrain him properly. After the dust settled, Getman was loaded into the back of one of the police cars. He wasn't responsible for the green ooze on Jimmy's lawn, but he sure did a good job at making himself look guilty, and he screamed bloody murder as they tried to make sense of the situation. The neighborhood kids and a few adults cheered. I was guilty of clapping myself. Louis pulled into my driveway and motioned me over. He remained in the car, but rolled down his window so that we could talk. "What's all of the excitement?" he asked me. "Oh, nothing really, Louis. The police just caned and arrested Getman because they think he was responsible for dumping some sort of familiar green liquid on Jimmy's lawn. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" "No," he said, sweating and twitching nervously. "Interesting. So, how was Revere today?" "Still smells the same, you know. Some things never change, I guess." Louis was visibly shaken and he giggled like a timid schoolboy at the end of each sentence. He nished. "Yeah, I suppose you're right. It's kind of like the leopard that can't change its spots, even though you give the leopard a chance to prove himself and make a change." 174. No wife, no kids, no plan. Louis didn't say anything. He just stared forward, unable to make direct eye contact with me. "So did the $10 cover you for gas?" I asked him. "It might have fell a little short, but I'll cover it." "I wouldn't want to shortchange you, Louis. I'm a man of honor and I like to deliver on what I promised." "You know, like you." Louis stuck his head out of the window and smiled. "It will be our secret. Don't worry about anything. The next t-shirt is on me." I looked down at Louis and couldn't help but grin. He was a slime ball and he'd never change, but he was a likable slime ball, which is not an easy feat to pull off, yet somehow he managed it. "Well," he said, checking his watch. "I've got to meet my mother in 10 minutes, so I'll catch you later." And with that Louis drove off like lightning, the fastest I have ever seen that green station wagon move. Mikey emerged out of the crowd of onlookers dressed in workout clothes, almost knocking the man in the bathrobe to the ground. "Hey, watch where you're going," the man demanded. Mikey turned and snarled at the man, showing his teeth like a dog ready to strike. There were no words said, just silent intimidation, and with that the man slinked away. "You missed all of the reworks, Mikey," I told him as he approached. "I heard all about it from Rose. Can you believe that shit?" "No. It's crazy. It was like a scene right out of Cops. Just so you know, I heard somebody talking about how it was you that told the cops Getman was involved." "Yeah, that's true. Well, not that I have to tell you, but I've got your back if Getman NDS out and decides to come after you." "Thanks, Mikey. There's nobody I'd rather have in my corner." Doug Green. 175. What I don't understand is, why does all of this weird shit always seem to happen around you? I couldn't tell you, but what I do know is that Getman deserved a good beating, so why question fate? Good point. Let's just hope that they cart away that dog of his too. I'm not scared of many things in life, but that canine gargoyle is an exception. I hear that. That thing is straight out of a horror movie. I looked down at Mikey's and chuckled under my breath. He was wearing spandex shorts and his cock bulge was put on display for all those interested to see. I didn't want to look, but the mangled mound of penis and balls was like a car wreck that you couldn't look away from. "So you able to hit the early aerobics class or what?" he asked me. "I'm all amped and ready to pound the workout pavement." "Yeah, I've got nothing on tap right now. Let me just put on some different clothes and then we can get out of here." I headed to my house for a wardrobe change as Mikey stretched in the street, farting and burping as he put pressure on his stomach by bending over to touch his toes. I returned quickly and we slid into the Ferrari. Mikey had a hard time squeezing his big frame into the tight T of the car, but his face lit up with excitement like a kid going to his RST baseball game. He ran his hand over the black leather dashboard like he was feeling up one of his many college-aged conquests, and when I turned the key, the engine rumbled like a tank. "This car is the balls," he said. We drove down Oak Street while Mikey hung his head out of the window like a basset hound out for a ride. He searched all over for people that he knew, hoping they would see him and be impressed by his choice of transportation. The Ferrari was a movie star and Mikey wanted to be a part of its entourage. To the Mickey's 176. No wife, no kids, no plan. Of the world, the car was a miniature slice of heaven, but I knew better. It was merely a pretty collection of nuts and bolts that accelerated like a scalded cat. From bumper to fender, it was all about showing off and unwarranted mystique. Shakespeare would have said it was full of sound and fury but signifying nothing, and while I agreed, I still couldn't part with her. However, at the same time, I didn't want to spoil Mikey's illusion about the car, but I found myself unable to bite my tongue when he dropped the "life would be perfect" bomb. "If I had this car and money, man, my life would be the balls," he said, utterly convinced by his own voice. "I'd be the king of the world, I'll tell you that much." "It's just a car, Mikey," I told him. "What you're buying into is not what the car actually is, but instead, the perception of what people think the car is. And that's not necessarily a good thing. Trust me, I know. People look at you like a Martian when you have a car like this. They envy you, but at the same time they think of you as someone who is much different than them, which means you end up alienating yourself. Why did you buy it then, smarty-pants?" He had me there. I'm lecturing him, but at the same time, I own the car. I tried to explain to him that for me, the car, RST, represented freedom and escape from a world I didn't enjoy. I liked the idea of being a LLED suitcase away from going nowhere fast, but I quickly learned that it was nothing but a misguided fantasy. "All the car did was get me a bunch of speeding tickets," I continued. "I'd go for long drives in the country with her, and then I'd come back owing the state hundreds of dollars. I ended up having to go to driver's retraining school because of all of the violations that the car brought me. Trust me, money and fancy cars do not bring happiness, and at the end of the day, it doesn't make you feel any better about yourself." I know it sounds like a cliché thing for some Doug Green 177. One with money and a Ferrari to say, but that's because you realize it, hand when you have these things. For me, it's not really about what I can buy and how I can spend it. Having money represents independence from the system. Money doesn't magically make things perfect like the movies imply, but it has given me the means to GHT the good, GHT. With all due respect, Drago, the good, GHT can mean anything because everyone thinks they're doing their own version of it, he said, sounding far more intelligent than I had yet to give him credit for. For me, getting by in life is the good, GHT. For Mrs. Fazano, the good, GHT is having enough bags in that vacuum of hers to carry on the madness. We all have our own good, GHT to go toe-to-toe with, and whether it brings happiness or not, money will help push all of us closer to that goal. I was awed. It was the RST time Mikey had gotten deep with me, and to my surprise, there was another layer to him that I hadn't ever looked for. Although he only made one point, that point silenced me because it made me realize how pompous I sounded. Also, I couldn't help but think how ridiculous it was that I was giving Mikey a lecture about materialism in a Ferrari, especially when I was sticking a needle with a hot dose of AF, Yenza in his arm. He had the leather smell of the car in his nostrils and the vibrating muscular metal was affecting every nerve ending in his body. I had planted the bug of a vehicular promised land in his brain. Mikey liked what he saw and was feeding off of the feeling the car gave him. I knew that to him, the Ferrari would be one additional diversion to take his attention away from what really mattered in life. "You never, nished answering my question," Mikey said. "Why did you buy the car in the RST place?" The reason I have the car now is to destroy the illusion of it so that I can pursue other wants that may have some real meaning, I said carefully, hoping not to step on my words. 178. No wife, no kids, no plan. Like what? He asked me. Jennifer, I said confidently. The mere mention of her made me feel good. She was a constant aim burning inside of me. You know, you two may be right for each other after all, Mikey told me. You and Jennifer are really kind of similar, what with all of the stuff going on in both of your heads. I'll bet the two of you are having a real what-do-you-call-it meeting of the minds. That we are, Mikey, I said with a chuckle. That was a nice way of putting it. A wise man you are. We entered the Posh Health Club about 20 minutes later. Mikey was carrying a change of clothes and a water bottle in a bowling bag that Rose had lent to him. I had a funny feeling from the start that my gym time with Mikey was going to be a strange outing even by my standards, and although I expressed my concern to him, Mikey convinced me that it was going to be as smooth as a Brazilian chick's cooch and that it was going to be his night to shine. Wasting no time, Mikey immediately approached a sweaty woman who was ordering a protein smoothie at the juice bar. "Can I buy you a cran something or other?" he asked her. She turned and glared at Mikey with disgust, and I grabbed him by the ear and marched him away before she had a chance to call the manager. We made our way to the front desk, presented our introductory coupons and received locker numbers with combinations for the electronic locks, as well as a pair of towels. Once inside the locker room, I located my locker and found that it was adjacent to a naked old man who refused to adhere to the normal standards of personal space. I loaded my wallet and keys into the locker and shut the door. I was already dressed for working out in a pair of faded blue sweatpants and an old t-shirt. To my surprise, Mikey's spandex shorts were not part of his gym garb, and he quickly removed them and slipped on a pair of far too short nylon shorts with the word Doug green. 179. Everlast just above his crotch. He then changed into a skin-tight muscle shirt with the words under construction stretched across his gorilla-sized chest and put on a pair of bright red wrestling shoes that seemed brand new and just out of the box. We had to wait an extra minutes as he wrapped electrical tape around his wrists and engers and sprayed his entire body down with pungent cologne. After putting the finishing touches on his bizarre outfit, Mikey stepped in front of a larger-than-life mirror and slapped himself in the face to get himself psyched up. Curious, perhaps even bi-curious, the naked old man looked on and Mikey noticed the pervert's heat-seeking glare as it sharp-shot his alimentary canal. Never one to back down from a stare, Mikey opted to express his displeasure on the matter. "If you keep eyeballing me, I'm not gonna think twice to cram my foot right up your depends-wearing ass." The naked old man scurried into the showers in hopes of escaping an inner-city beatdown. "You realize we're going to hip-hop aerobics and not a boxing ring, right?" I asked Mikey. "Life is a GHT, my man. You have to be prepared at all times." And then like a prize, after headed into a 12-round bout, Mikey covered his neck with the towel and marched down the hallway of the locker room. I followed, shaking my head in amusement and bracing myself for a tidal wave of double takes. We followed the signs directing us to the aerobics room and soon realized that we were the only two men taking the class. Mikey grinned, sensing an early victory, and made eye contact with each of the unsuspecting women in the RST2 rows. "I look okay, don't I?" Mikey whispered. "You look like a cajillion dollars," I whispered back. 180. No wife, no kids, no plan. Then why am I getting such strange looks? Do I have a boogie on my face or something? "No," I said. "I just don't think they're used to having all that many penises in here." "Oh yeah, we're as good as golden in this vagina mart. Head to the back. We can watch all of the asses dance and stretch." We established a base camp for ourselves in the corner of the room far from any direct contact with the other Jane Fondas in attendance. The instructor arrived shortly after we got settled and she unknowingly forced both of us to do a double take. She was a 6-foot-tall blonde with long, toned legs and a stomach you would sell your own mother to lick. Even the women that surrounded us ogled her, appreciating every nook and cranny of her body, which seemed to be sculpted from the hands of Michelangelo himself. Mikey had to literally wipe the drool from the corners of his mouth when he realized he hadn't swallowed any saliva since she entered the room. "What I wouldn't give to stick my dumbbell into that," he whispered to me, just loud enough so that the woman in front of us overheard, turned, and called Mikey a pig with her eyes. The class began slowly, but the pace quickly established itself as something I was unprepared for. We both tried to follow the various kicking and punching and jumping that the instructor threw at us, but we didn't come close to mimicking her movements, and instead appeared to come off as a couple of slow Stanleys headed for the short bus. At one point I looked over at Mikey and caught him frozen in a crouched position, his foot lodged close to his head. He looked like a dog attempting to scratch away a pesky EA from its ear, and I laughed, breaking my own concentration and falling to the padded, "Ower." My tumble to the mat knocked me out of contention completely and I could no longer follow the pattern of moves that Doug Green. 181. The rest of the class was performing, honestly, so instead I opted to doing nothing but jumping jacks for the remaining of the class. Meanwhile, I couldn't help looking at all the women in their spandex suits jacking their buttocks up to unprecedented heights. There was a great sense of urgency about their bones. Their arms were spinning like the blades of a fan and I had to dodge what I hoped to be unmotivated punches from the exercisers that surrounded me. I watched in wonder, these women animated by the passions and impulses that have driven men since the dawn of mankind, these women with their swollen liquid faces like they were just baptized in testosterone. Suddenly Mikey fell to the ground and his thighs and buttocks shook violently. At RST I thought he was pulling a practical joke or in the middle of crafting a high-concept attempt at gaining the sympathy vote from the uninterested women, but when his face turned blue and his eyes rolled back into his skull, I knew it wasn't just Mikey being Mikey. The instructor stopped the class immediately and everybody gathered around him, each questioning the problem at hand and who should be sent to get help. One attractive woman with childbearing hips informed the group that she was a dental technician and that Mikey was most likely having an epileptic attack. "So, where do you work as a dental technician?" I asked her as Mikey continued to convulse at my feet. "Brighton," she replied as another woman in the crowd suggested somebody put 2 engers in Mikey's mouth to keep him from swallowing his tongue. "Really?" I said. "I've been looking for a new dentist. Mine just retired. Dr. Lewiston is excellent. You should totally try him out." "I think I might. How do you spell his last name?" "Lewiston. 182. No wife, no kids, no plan." An irate chubby woman broke up my conversation with the dental technician, cock-blocking me when I wasn't even thinking with my cock. "Just listen to that horrible pig," the fat man-hater shouted. "His friend could be dying on the and he's trying to get that woman's number." "That's not true," I shouted back. "Mind your own business, you cow." The crowd gasped and I returned my attention to Mikey, whose body had stopped vibrating. He was coming around and his eyes had repositioned themselves in their rightful place. "Drag me into the hallway," he begged. "Mikey, I don't think that's a good idea. You should rest a minute. You're sick." Against doctor's orders, Mikey tried to stand, but fell back to the padded, his right ball exploding out of his boxer shorts like a re-racker on the Chinese New Year. I half considered icking it back in to do my friend a solid, but I quickly reconsidered when I saw the entire class of women staring down at his testicular misfortune. The best I could do for him was to prevent somebody from accidentally stepping on it. "Why's everybody staring at my crotch?" he asked me quietly. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it, Mikey. Your nut is apping in the breeze like a screen door in a hurricane. It's not a pretty sight." Forcing himself to recover from his lightheadedness so that he could save what little of his dignity remained, Mikey rose to his feet with my help and we exited slowly. He was still dazed and groggy when he nonchalantly tucked his testicle back into his shorts and we collected our things from the locker room and left the health club, never to return. Mikey entered a heavyweight champ, but left after a knockout in the 4th round. Doug Green. 183. I loaded Mikey into my car and he leaned back to rest. Before driving out of the parking lot I listened to a message left by Rooster on my cell phone. "Hey, babes, it's me," the message said. "You're all set for your date with Jill tomorrow night and I just wanted to let you know where you can pick her up because I'm not going to be in work tomorrow. It's my kid's last day at summer camp and they're doing some kind of rehearsal or some bullshit. Anyway, her address is 79 Peacock Street in Chelsea, about a block up from a CVS. She's expecting you at 7:30 so don't be late. I made dinner reservations for the two of you at Le Bon at 8. And, babes, this girl isn't shy, if you know what I mean. You don't need to talk about the secret nature of a pineapple to get into her pants." I walked Mikey up the steps to his apartment and made sure that he got inside without having another epileptic attack. When I made my way home, I noticed I had a visitor sitting on my porch steps. It didn't take long to realize that my uninvited guest was one of Jamal's associates, whom I saw earlier that day, but had not been formally introduced to. "Jamal got arrested, yo," he told me. "For what?" "Slinging crack like he does every day." "What do you want me to do about it?" I asked him, trying to come off as uninterested. "People been talking about you," he told me. "People been saying you have connections. You know, like the mob, business, and shit." Feeling an odd sense of pride in being thought of as a connected man, I stood tall and assured the urban soldier that he had come to the right place. "Jamal is looking at a mandatory 10 in the pen," he continued. "He don't know I'm talking to you, but is there anything you can do?" 184. No wife, no kids, no plan. How much crack was involved? Shit, I don't know. I guess it was about 20-VE grams or something like that. That's all. And he's looking at 10 years for that. That's what I'm fucking saying, yo. Kid don't deserve that shit. 10 years is a long time. That much time can change a man. But we used to it round here. It's how they keep us niggas off the street. Jamal's predicament led me with rage and disgust. While I didn't condone his activities, there were far greater threats in the world than a low-level drug dealer from the streets of Boston. As far as I was concerned, this was a racial shakedown. Money may not bring happiness like I told Mikey, but it can often buy justice or even injustice. I would use my money to secure Jamal's freedom regardless of his crime. I collected any information that I thought would be helpful in getting Jamal released, including his last name, which his associate was not eager to give up. I may not have been a card-carrying member of the powerful families of the world, but it was situations like the one presented to me that I was good at resolving. I knew it was going to cost me a pretty penny in the long run, but I was willing to make the investment in Jamal. I called my personal attorney Hank on his cell to arrange an emergency meeting for the morning. I needed a legal hitman. 13. I went to a lawyer's of CE in downtown Boston, which while easy to ND, was not easy to park at because it was smack dab in the middle of the high-rent district and every lot had restrictions. After ending a spot a few blocks away, I walked towards the high-rise building with a blank check in my hand, though it may as well have been a suitcase full of unmarked cash. Hank had referred the legal eagle of questionable business practices to me because, as he put it, he was a guy who knew a lot of people and could make things happen, which of course meant he excelled in bribery, or to put it gently, he was a power broker. I entered the plush of CE and was greeted by a beautiful, young, blonde receptionist that looked like a high-end Hollywood hooker. She quickly ushered me into the lawyer's personal of CE, where the attorney in question introduced himself as Joe Masterson. He was a short, thin man and had a face that resembled my pet squirrel Rocky. Skipping any sort of small talk and getting right to business, Mr. Masterson immediately informed me that Jamal was looking at a mandatory 10-year sentence for the possession and distribution of 20-VE grams of crack cocaine, which he sold to an undercover detective, making it a pretty clear-cut case for the prosecution. I was told 10 years was a possibility, but I didn't believe it. I told him. He's looking at serving a decade for possession of a candy bar worth of crack. I mean, there are people out there touching kids and getting off with a slap on the wrist. They'll put you away for much less than that, Mr. Masterson said as he typed away on his computer, obviously multitasking. 185. 186. No wife, no kids, no plan. It's the law. I just have to work within the parameters they give me. I had dealt with enough lawyers in my life to know that they always give you the worst case scenario, and in doing so, try to generate as much fear as possible so that they can extract the maximum fee from your cold, dead hands. It was a tactic shared by the entire industry, and I knew it was mostly just smoke that they blew up clients' asses, but in this particular case, with Jamal selling directly to an undercover detective, I knew it was a serious offense that a judge wouldn't just make disappear, at least, not unless the price was right. Thanks for the gloom and doom spiel, Mr. Masterson, but give it to me straight. Is there anything I can do, or am I just wasting my money by trying? The cocky lawyer opened a manila folder on his desk and proceeded to read off Jamal's rap sheet, which included numerous assault and battery charges, one of which resulted in an 8-month jail sentence, of which Jamal served 4. There was also a previous drug charge listed, which was continued without a ending. Jamal's small, in the grand scheme of things, and as long as he hasn't made any direct enemies within the police force or local judicial system, there's a good chance a call to the top could get him off, he told me. I'm politically connected in more ways than one, but for me to make that call, it's going to require a considerable retainer for my services. How much? I asked, surprised that he didn't call it a campaign contribution. It will take 20,000 for me to try and nip this in the bud. Fortunately for us, he hasn't been formally charged, which means I can deal with the matter outside of the courts. I grabbed a pen off of the lawyer's desk and LLED out the required amount on the blank check I had brought along. I was Doug Green. 187. Fairly confident that he had already made some calls to see if Jamal's release was even possible, and for a guy like Joe Masterson, this was a baby tooth for him to pull and would probably not require anything more than a conversation or two to make the charge disappear. I handed the check to the shark in the suit. He looked it over and then extended his hand to me. We shook vigorously. Great, he said. I'll start on this right away. I left the lawyers of CE, hoofed it to my car and then drove to work, where there were little to no interruptions or complaints for the majority of the day, that is until I got a phone call from Bill Franconi from City Papers. How can I help you, Mr. Franconi? I asked him. I take it you've been following what's going on with Moakley? Indeed. We are on high alert over here. Well, I just got wind that he withdrew all of his free offers to the advertisers. That's great news. Looks like there is some justice in this world after all. Maybe so, but there are a few things about it all that I don't understand. Do you know why someone would go out of their way to vandalize all of Moakley's billboards in the city? I don't know the answer to that, but I did happen to see the artist's handiwork, I said innocently. I guess you'd have to ask Moakley. I can only guess that the man's made quite a few enemies with his cutthroat tactics. I hear he stole the business from a relative on top of everything else, so you know, when you do those types of things, they can come back to haunt you in the future. Franconi, confused into a pin-drop silence, obviously suspected me of some involvement, but thankfully the last missile I read landed, causing the bloodhound to lose his scent. In reality, he had no idea as to the extent of what really happened to make Mowgli 188. No wife, no kids, no plan. Renege on his advertising offer, and if I played my cards right, it would stay that way. It was nice talking to you, Mr. Franconi, but I got the mayor in my CE and I can't keep him waiting. I promise I'll call you if I hear anything on this Mowgli matter. I would appreciate that, and I'd be happy to do the same if I catch wind of anything, he told me. Great. Talk to you soon. To my surprise, it remained relatively quiet in the CE for the remainder of the day, and I was able to tie up enough loose ends so that when I Chaley retired, there wouldn't be a lot of holes that needed to be LLED. I was due to have dinner with Rooster's wife's friend Jill that evening and dreaded the thought of Jennifer ending out I was going on a date with another woman. I headed home after clocking out from work and dressed in my best hobo attire, wrinkly pants and an equally as wrinkled shirt. I also decided that it was the perfect occasion to don my herpes belt. I gave myself plenty of time to make it to Jill's apartment for 7:30, knowing that C to Chelsea was going to be a bitch. I arrived in her neck of the woods right on schedule and located my CVS landmark without any problems. I had to drive past her building 3 times before I found a parking spot within reasonable walking distance to her door, and I moaned and groaned to myself about not wanting to be on the date prior to ever stepping foot out of my car. I was going into the night with a sour taste in my mouth, convincing myself that I wasn't allowed to have fun no matter what the circumstances turned out to be. I made my way up the tiny steps to her door and knocked 3 times, half hoping that someone would ask me for a password that I was unaware of, only to be sent away into the darkness of the night. Unfortunately, Jill answered in record time, and I was immediately struck by her bright orange shirt that resembled the color of a high-dug green 189. Lighter Harry used to correct editorials. The shirt was unbuttoned deep into Jill's chest, revealing round, jiggly cleavage. She was about feet 7, a slender redhead in her early 30s with unusually large calves that X'd below the hemline of her short, sequined skirt. We said our hellos and she invited me inside. The RST room you walked into upon entering her apartment was a sparsely decorated parlor that resembled an CE reception area. The only place to sit was a single cushioned love seat and a plain wooden chair. There was a miniature coffee table, LLED with various gossip rags, and a Poland Spring water fountain complete with a paper cup dispenser in the corner. She ushered me over to a SH tank, LLED with neon rocks and plastic plants, and pointed to a ceramic skull resting on the oar of the aquarium that had bubbles pouring from its eyes, nose, and mouth. Sometimes I sit for hours and stare at it, she told me. I searched the tank like a skilled detective, looking for any signs of life. Where are the SH? I asked her. Oh, there aren't any. I had a few, but they all died. They're really hard to care for, and honestly, they dirty up the prettiness of the tank, so now I just leave it SH free. A SH tank without SH set off a warning bell immediately in my brain. It was apparent to me that while Jill could obviously think outside of the box, she was also an idiot. In my experience, this was a dangerous combination and could only spell trouble. Do you like animals? She asked me. Sure, especially the ones that aren't overly domesticated. I'm a big Animal Planet watcher. Oh really? I'm not big on cable television unless it's the E! channel. You should check it out sometime. It's pretty good. I saw this one show where they had a dog on that was trilingual. He could 190. No wife, no kids, no plan. Answer to commands in Russian, Lithuanian, and Latvian, but didn't know a single command in English. Oh really? She said again, only this time in a few octaves higher. Do you speak any foreign languages? I asked her, hoping to jump ship on the oh really train. I took some French in high school, so I can understand it, but can't carry on a full conversation or anything like that. What about you? Not really, but I have a lot of international friends. They bring a lot to the table. Oh really? She said once again, a few more octaves higher than our previous go-round. Shoot me now, I pleaded to the gods above, but instead of a sympathetic escape from the heavens, I received a tour of Jill's picture shelf, where I saw framed photographs of her father, mother, and an older sister who wasn't nearly as attractive as her younger sibling. Her father appeared to be serious and extremely conservative, while her mother came off playful and young at heart. I wondered if her parents knew that when they posed for the photos that they'd at one time be displayed for countless males to view just prior to hosing their daughter. My guess was that conservative daddy might not like the thought of that very much. After a brief tour of the apartment, we exited the same way I entered and Jill locked the door behind us, the sound of a heavy steel deadbolt echoing in my ears. We walked the short distance to my car and it was apparent right away that Jill and the spider were an instant match. I opened the door for her like a gentleman and watched as her muscular legs lifted themselves inside. I made my way around the car and hopped into the driver's seat, inserting the key into the ignition and revving the car's engine. Doug Green. 191. I love being this close to the ground, she purred as she tossed her red locks back and glanced up through the car's clear roof. Isn't it amazing how so many people go through life without ever looking up? We're told to look both ways before crossing, but nobody ever tells us to look up. Why do you think that is? I'm pretty sure it's because a car isn't going to hit you from above when you cross a street. Maybe, she said. There are so many stars out tonight, huh? I just love the way they wink at me like I'm a movie star or something. I couldn't help but think of Jennifer as I drove to the restaurant, wanting more than ever to turn around and go home. Whereas Jennifer had a deep and intuitive understanding of the celestial bodies, Jill was a simpleton that saw the twinkling stars as another hungry hornball looking to get into her panties. What do you do for work? I asked her. I'm in the cosmetics business. What exactly do you do in the industry? Well, I'm proud to say that I was just promoted to senior spritzer. It took me 2 long years, but I, Nally did it. Spritzer. Oh, I'm the girl that sprays the perfume on women when they enter the department store, and now with the promotion, I'm the RST one the customers see and pass by. It's a lot of responsibility with the heavy truth, see we get, but I'm a nose to the grindstone kind of girl as my daddy always says, so I'm managing. Do you like it? I enjoy making women feel good about themselves, but it's not like my dream job or anything like that. I actually hope to one day open up my own store. I already have a name for it. Want to hear it? Sure, I said, trying hard to sound like I actually gave a damn. 192. No wife, no kids, no plan. Perfume. I was silent. Get it? She asked me. You know, like a cat. Perfume. Oh, right. Like a cat. That's very clever. Yeah, my daddy loves the name and says it's a sure dash, re-hit. I bet. I really admire you and Rooster for building your own company. It must be amazing to create something like that and then watch it grow. Well, it's not all it's cracked up to be, I told her as I turned the car left and headed down a busy street. It's a lot of responsibility and it can be pretty exhausting at times. But, it must be worth it, right? I mean, look at how successful you and Rooster are. You've got to ask yourself what's more important though. Success or happiness? Aren't you happy? I pulled into Lebone's parking lot and dodged Jill's question with a silent shrug. I just don't see how anybody can be happy without money, she continued, her voice creeping higher and higher to the point where I feared my windows were going to shatter. It's expensive to live. There are plenty of poor people where I live and they all seem to get by on happiness. Well, I want to be rich. It's like, I like money and I should have what I like, right? I hope you don't mind me talking about this. My daddy always tells me that I'm going to scare guys away with the way I talk about money. No, you're okay, I assured her as I pulled into the widest parking spot I could, and for fear of being dinged by morons who open their doors without looking, RST. Doug Green. 193. I just love the way this car drives, she confessed, rubbing the inside of her thighs as if the vibrating engine was turning her on. Have you ever been to this restaurant? No. It's way too expensive for a senior spritzer salary. I'm so excited that you decided to take me here though. I've been thinking about it all day long. We entered the small, but ostentatious restaurant and waited for the maitre d' to, niche seating a senior couple that held hands like a pair of teenaged lovebirds. Le Bon was famous for its London broil and infamous for its price tags. Jill didn't hide her excitement about being in the high-end establishment and immediately signed the guest book, using 2 lines to write her name in large, cursive letters. I glanced into the dining room and watched 2 waiters dressed in tuxedos working a dozen spacious tables, all but one, LLED with googly-eyed lovers. I wished it was Jennifer I was having dinner with, but I had to settle for a table in the back with Jill. At least I had the London broil to look forward to. Jill studied the one-page menu that featured a section on appetizers and entrees and gasped loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear when she saw the cost of each dinner selection. $30 for chicken parm, she declared. No wonder why I've never been here before. I bet the food is absolutely scrumptious though, huh? Do you always eat this gourmet? Not at all really, I confessed. I eat mostly canned foods, a lot of corn, baked beans, and Progresso soups. I've always told my friends that if they, and me dead in my apartment one day, the RST thing they should do is have the coroner check me for botulism. Jill looked at me incredulously for a moment before breaking out in a high-pitched laugh that gave all of the dogs within a 20-block radius a splitting headache. Rooster told me that you had a real dry sense of humor. It's very British. I like it. 194. No wife, no kids, no plan. I placed my menu face down in front of me, signaling to the waiter that I was ready to order. Jill continued to study hers, undecided and seemingly confused by the many big words printed on the laminated sheet. So what looks good? I asked her. Well, maybe you can help me. I can't decide between the salmon and the sword, sh. What are you going to get? I was leaning towards the London broil. It's sort of the dish they're the most famous for. I love meat, but I don't like having it on my plate unless it's in a bun. To me, just looking down at the piece of hunking, it's barbaric. Well, then why don't I skip the London broil and get the sword, and then you can order the salmon, and then we'll just share? I don't want to gross you out by eating a hunking piece of anyway, and this way you'll get to try both. That's a great idea, she smiled. And so romantic. I thought about Jennifer again. What was I doing here, partaking in this RST date charade with a woman I obviously had no interest in? Everything felt dirty about what I was doing, and I knew that if Jennifer was aware of my actions, it would cost me any chance of being with her now or in the future. She was an honest girl and I was being dishonest, both to her and myself. I should have walked away, but didn't. Instead, I convinced myself that it was best to stick it out and just have fun in the moment. Nobody needed to get hurt because in the end I didn't plan on doing anything wrong. It was what it was, dinner with a friend. Jill placed her menu on the table and a waiter appeared in record time. Can I interest either of you in a drink? He asked. I ordered a bottle of white wine and then proceeded to inform the waiter what we'd be eating that evening. He told us they were Doug Green. 195. Both excellent choices and that the chef was quite fond of cooking them. He disappeared into the kitchen and quickly returned with the bottle of wine and a basket of freshly baked focaccia bread. He popped the cork on the bottle and let the wine breathe, pouring a tiny amount of the liquid into my glass and allowing me to sample it. I took a sip. It's good, I told him. Excellent, sir, he said, pouring both Jill and myself a hearty glass of the wine. "Your meal is being prepared as we speak. Please do let me know if there is anything else I can help you with in the meantime." The waiter left our table and I took a long swig from my glass. Jill investigated her surroundings, taking in the decor and overall feel of the restaurant. "This place reminds me of a place I went to in New York once," she said. "It does have that downtown feel to it, I suppose." "I was on a date with a multi-millionaire," she shared with an orgasmic tone in her voice. Jill reached for a piece of bread at the same time as I did and our hands collided like a human see accident. She giggled, grabbing a slice of the focaccia and dug in without much hesitation. "You can always tell how good a restaurant is by the bread they serve, and this is some amazing bread," she said. "Oh really?" I returned, mimicking her trademark tagline. "Yup. If it's tasty and hot, that's usually a good sign." "Oh really?" I repeated, now having caught a serious case of the "Oh really, you?" Jill raised her glass of wine and I prematurely toasted it before she could say a single word. She took a large gulp of the glass's contents and hiccuped loudly after swallowing it down. She tried to play it off, hoping that nobody heard, but even the senior couple 196. "No wife, no kids, no plan." Tables over caught a bit of it. They must have had their hearing aids turned up to 11. "I just love life," Jill declared, a smile painted on her face from ear to ear. "I had an experience recently which made me appreciate being alive and I'm never going to take any of this for granted ever again." "What happened to you?" I asked curiously. "Well, it's kind of personal. Not that I'm embarrassed to share it with you, I just don't want to scare you off. My daddy always said that there are certain subjects that don't make good table talk, and I'm afraid this falls into one of those categories." "You're not going to scare me off," I told her. "I mean, if you're uncomfortable talking about it, that's any, but if you need to get it off of your chest, I'm any listener." Jill giggled and then took another bite of her bread, chewing and swallowing it down in record time. "I had a bump on my cervix," she confessed, looking down at her plate, unable to make eye contact. "The doctor said it could have been cancerous and they did a biopsy. It was like, literally, the longest 2 days of my life as I waited for the test results to come back. I couldn't believe it. I was getting a recent history of Jill's crotch by candlelight." "I bet," I said. "That must have been a heavy 48 hours. You have no idea. If it wasn't for my daddy, I would have lost it entirely, but he helped to keep me grounded and take my mind off of it." I sipped from my wine. The daddy talk was really teetering on creepy by that point. Anyway, the results eventually did come back and thank my lucky stars they were negative. "Wow. I can see why you have a new outlook on life." Doug Green. 197. "It's short, you know. We really just have to enjoy ourselves while we're here, 'cause there's no telling when we won't be." Underneath the table, hidden from the rest of the restaurant by a burgundy tablecloth, I felt Jill's leg rub up against mine. I leaned into it, trying to decipher if I had mistaken the table's post for one of her muscular gams, but I was right the rest time and my leaning action only invited more rubbing on her part. The waiter returned with our food, forcing the foot action underneath the table to take recess. Jill and I exchanged an equal portion of sh, and my rest bite came from a mound of steamed zucchini piled neatly to the side of my plate. I was never a huge fan of seafood and was upset with myself for not ordering the London broil. I would have been more inclined to let it go and enjoy my meal had the women sitting next to us not been eating the savory steak. Jill took a bite of the sword and sunk into her chair, wriggling in enjoyment. She moved with an animalistic sexuality in everything she did. If food made her lower region quiver, I wondered what my tongue would do. "Oh, this is just absolutely unbelievable," she groaned. "It's a nice presentation too," I said in a template, X response. I feel like I know you, she told me, moving her airy hair out of her eyes, once again turning a simple movement into a seductive act. What do you mean? I asked as I placed a bit of each underwater creature on my fork and took a dual bite. I don't know. It's just like, there's a connection here that I can't explain. Maybe it's because we're eating each other's food, I said jokingly, taking another bite of my zucchini. Tit for tat can cause all that. Yeah, but I haven't even shared any of my tit with you, yet. She joked, cupping both of her voluptuous breasts. 198. No wife, no kids, no plan. The booby grab caused me to choke on my zucchini. I coughed and Jill giggled, knowing that she was to blame for my inability to eat like a normal human being. She upped the ante even further, slipping off her high heel and pressing the sole of her foot into my thigh, slowly moving it north towards Penis Town. Thankfully the waiter once again saved me, positioning himself at the halfway point between both Jill and I. And how is your meal this evening? He asked. It's wonderful, Jill responded. I like to think of my salmon having been caught by an Eskimo beneath the Alaskan sky. That's how good it is. A lovely sentiment, miss. I'll be sure to inform the chef of your kind words. The waiter turned to me. And you, sir? He asked. I like to think of mine as a three-legged duck who returned to the sea and transformed himself into a retarded sword, only to be caught in a giant net, gutted and sent to Lebon to have his fatty, appear as part of the daily specials. The waiter stared at me wide-eyed, confused by my response. Very good, sir. If you need anything else, please let me know. We'll have another bottle of wine, please. Right away, sir. The waiter retreated and Jill reached over, placing her hand on top of mine. That was so beautiful, she told me. Do you believe in reincarnation? I like to think so, I said. I studied a bit of Hinduism in my college days and that's a big portion of the belief system. The problem is, if things keep going the way they're going in our world, everything's going to wind up extinct and there won't be anything left for us to be born into. Doug Green. 199. I hope that's not true. It's a sad future for us all if that's the case. I'm sure we'll all be, any. If I get a chance to come back as anything I want, I'm just going to come up with my own animal to return as. It'll be a hipporhinocephant. A what? A hipporhinocephant. It'll be a cross between a hippopotamus, a rhinoceros, and an elephant. I just hope that the hipporhinocephant isn't a delicacy in the future, because I don't want to wind up on someone's plate like this sword, and salmon. After we nished the meal and wine, I paid the bill using my credit card and we stumbled out of the restaurant, both slightly tipsy from nishing off both bottles of wine. Against my better sober judgment, I got behind the wheel and revved the engine, eager to get Jill home as quickly as possible. She was looking more and more appealing as the night wore on, and the alcohol had given me temporary memory loss because I no longer thought of Jennifer. Upon arriving back in Chelsea, I found a parking spot directly in front of Jill's building and left the car running, half expecting not to get the invite inside. With her pupils dilated from the alcohol intake, she leaned over towards me, exposing the bulk of her breasts, which popped from her orange shirt like two corks from a pair of champagne bottles. My eyes dislodged from their sockets like a cartoon character as I stared down at her pressed together cleavage, and she asked me if I wanted to come into her apartment for a nightcap. I agreed, hoping that the nightcap would turn into me seeing her breasts in their fully naked and natural state. We no sooner closed the door after entering her apartment when we began a long, slobbery kiss, Jill's doggy bag still hanging from her hand, crinkling as we went at each other with our tongues. I grabbed the plastic bag and tossed it to the floor, pressing Jill up against the wall and infiltrating her skirt with my wandering hands. 200. No wife, no kids, no plan. Continuing to creep them further and further upwards until I discovered she wasn't wearing any panties. With her ass now exposed and resting up against the white wall, I pawed at her, as I worked my mouth downward to her neck, skidding over her collarbone and leaving a trail of saliva like a traveling snail. Like a madman possessed, I ripped at her shirt, tearing the buttons from the fabric and removing her purple bra with my teeth. With her large, welcoming breasts now exposed, I sucked on her tits for what seemed like an eternity, and worked them over in my mouth until they reminded me of chewing gum that had lost its avor. Jill pushed me backwards and then threw me down on the love seat, tearing the shirt from my body and clawing at my chest with her manicured nails. She bit at my nipples as she unbuttoned my pants and we sank deep into the cushion of the miniature couch. "Do you want me?" she asked. "Of course I do," I replied. "Can't you feel how much I want you?" Jill moaned as she dry humped against my hard shaft, which was still hiding in the con-ness of my pants. She reached underneath the love seat and pulled out a Payless shoebox as I removed the remainder of my clothing. Inside the box was a pleasure arsenal of condoms, creams, jellies, spray cans and even a mini toxic waste container. I reached into the box and pulled out a glow-in-the-dark rubber. I slipped it on and then threw myself on top Jill, spreading her legs and sliding myself inside of her. I was thrusting, RMLY from the start, but Jill hardly moved at all, forcing me to reach beneath her and push her ass upwards in an attempt at getting her more involved. She sat there, staring up at me with disappointed eyes, and I imagined her thinking, "This isn't how Daddy does it," over and over again. I was pissed when it turned out not to be the kind of wild, crazy sex I expected, and instead, ended up becoming a slow-motion, half-hearted hump session. We were Doug Green. 201. Like two sticks rubbing together but barely giving off any heat, and I decided to end the torture, ripping off the condom and glazing her stomach with my love icing, not even bothering to put in the effort to get her off. When it was over, Jill rushed to the bathroom and returned with a fresh coat of makeup. I was already collecting my things when she hopped down on the love seat, lying on her back with her eyes closed and her unusually long toes pointed to the ceiling. Her face was shiny and blank like a factory fresh gravestone. After piling my clothes in my arms, I went to the bathroom, passing by the various pictures of her family and, ending it hard not to stare her sure to be touchy-feely father in his emotionless eyes. I closed the door behind me and began a search for any meaningful source. After a thorough investigation of my extremities turned up no immediate abnormalities, I grabbed a container of antibacterial soap from the sink and covered my entire penis with a transparent gizm that smelled like jasmine. I let it soak into the fragile ash for a few minutes, hoping it would help to kill any of the germs that had decided to stow away. After I felt it had been fully cleansed, I stepped into the bathtub and turned on the faucet, crouching beneath the running water and rinsing the soap down the drain. Before I could rise to my feet, Jill had entered the bathroom unannounced. "What are you doing?" she asked, her eyebrows sinking between her eyes. "I'm washing myself." "Why the fuck would you do that?" she snapped. "Do you think I've got an STD or something?" "Of course not. You think I'm some kind of slut, don't you?" "Not all," I said, drying off my penis with a pile of toilet paper, the bits and pieces sticking to it. "Just relax." 202. No wife, no kids, no plan. Don't tell me to relax. I hate when people tell me to relax. My daddy warned me about guys like you. "Listen," I said, trying to calm her down. "Let me just niche up in here and get dressed, and then I can come out and we can talk about it. I really don't think you're a slut. I swear." "Fuck off," she huffed, slamming the door behind her. I nished, drying and dressing myself quickly, and exited the bathroom in hopes of diffusing the apparently volatile situation. Jill was already standing at the entrance of her apartment with the door wide open when I stepped into her living room, and she insisted that I leave. Confused by what was happening, I left without question. As I walked towards my car, she screamed at me from the window of her apartment. "You haven't heard the last of me, cocksucker." I sat in my car, shocked into sobriety and feeling horrible for what happened that evening. Sleeping with Jill meant I had violated Jennifer and the feelings that I had for her. Had I been a crier, I may have shed a tear that night, but instead I just drove home and, nished off a 12-pack that had been waiting for me in the refrigerator, deciding to wallow in my own misery as I watched a documentary about the capybara on Animal Planet. 14. I woke up in the morning to a splitting headache and the sound of relentless pounding on my front door. I rose out of bed slowly, dodging a number of scattering insects and the clothes I wore the previous night, all of which had been tossed around the room like a salad. The pounding continued as I slipped a pair of pants over my naked bottom half and marched through the house to the living room, where I opened the front door and was greeted by a pair of police of sirs, one husky guy with a dark beard and a tall cop in his early 20s that seemed fresh out of the academy. "Morning, of sirs," I said, squinting my eyes as the sun glared into them, magna ed by my heavy hangover. The rookie asked me what my name was and I happily obliged with the information, fearing they were there to follow up on the green ooze that had been dumped on Jimmy's lawn. Without warning, the husky cop ordered me out of the house, and once outside on the porch, he spun me around against the wall, cuffed me and read my rights. "Wait," I pleaded. "What's this all about?" "You're under arrest for the rape and aggravated assault of Jillian Bernal," the rookie told me. As they marched me down the walkway towards the parked cruiser, I saw Jennifer watching the scene unfold from her aunt's yard, where she hovered over the plant I had given her 2 days before. She had a watering can in her hand and a concerned, yet disappointed look on her face. My heart sunk to my knees. I knew 203. 204. No wife, no kids, no plan. What she was thinking, because it was written all over her face. Everything I said was a lie and I had been playing games with her. The husky cop opened the back door of the cruiser and pushed me inside. The car itself must have belonged to one of the K9 units, because the back seat was covered in multicolored dog hair and smelled like a wet golden retriever after a long day of fetch in the ocean. My mind started to spin, fearful of being interrogated for rape, with long yellow hairs now all over my clothes due to the K9 cop that usually sat back there. Could I go to jail even though I was innocent? Did I really do anything wrong? Did Jill plan this all along? Could Rooster be involved? After a short drive downtown, the rookie driver pulled into the police station and I was escorted into the building, more spicey, Callie, a tiny room with 2 wooden chairs and a circular table that looked suitable for a card game. After a few panicked minutes of sitting by myself, the metal door opened and a middle-aged man dressed in a suit entered. "My name is Detective Atwater," the serious lawman informed me. "Needless to say, I have a few questions to ask you and I expect you to answer them." "This is ridiculous," I howled. "I didn't do anything wrong." "Yeah, 'cause I've never heard that one before." "Are you mocking me? I am an innocent man, damn it." "Were you or were you not in the presence of Jill Bernal last night?" "I think I should have a lawyer present," I said, sinking down into my uncomfortable wooden chair. "Why would an innocent man need a lawyer?" he asked me smugly. "Because I've seen guys like me get railroaded by guys like you plenty of times before. I don't know what Jill told you, but the truth is that I was, XED up with her through my business partner's wife." I dug green. 205. "Picked her up at her apartment last night, we went to dinner, we had a few glasses of wine, and then we ended up back at her place where we had consensual sex. That's how the night played out, and that's the God's honest truth." "So you went back to her place and shagged after a night out on the town?" "What I'm not getting is, if that was the case, how come she's accusing you of rape now? If you ask me, it seems kind of silly for 2 consenting adults to go through. Did you do anything to upset her during the evening?" "It's ridiculous, but yes. I've heard plenty of ridiculous things on the job, so try me." "After we had sex, I went to the bathroom," I said hesitantly. "She got upset when she walked in on me washing my dick. Washing your dick? He asked, both surprised and confused by my response. I've been seeing this new girl and, after I had sex with Jill, I felt really guilty about it and went into the bathroom to I don't know wash away my sins, I guess. She opened the door when I was rinsing antibacterial soap off of my penis and she went ballistic. And at what point in the night did you call her a slut? He asked, checking over his notes. I was sweating heavily as I shifted in the chair, trying whatever I could to end a comfortable position as the world around me caved in. Detective Atwater was writing down bits and pieces of what I was saying, but I could tell he didn't believe me. He had no reason to. An accused rapist is labeled a rapist forever, whether he's guilty or not. My life was over. I never called her a slut. I told him as I slammed my hand down on the table. She just thought I did. What did you call her then? 206. No wife, no kids, no plan. I didn't call her anything. When she came into the bathroom, she started ranting about how I was washing my dick off because I thought she was a slut, but I never said anything like that. She just assumed I thought she was a slut. So do you? Do I what? Do you think she's a slut? He asked me, jotting something down in his notes. No. I think she's a bitch for screwing me over like this, but I never thought she was a slut. All I wanted to do was wash my penis off and she took offense to that. Okay, calm down. I still have a few more questions to ask you. First off, when exactly did you throw the woman down on the sofa? I sighed and leaned my head back, staring up at the bright light that hung from the ceiling. I never threw her on the sofa, she threw me. And secondly, that thing can't even be classy, Ed, as a sofa because it's too damn small and uncomfortable. I know because I had my back pressed up against it as she pounced on top of me. Did you take her clothes off before the two of you made it to the sofa? I don't understand, I told him. Was she naked before you got down on the sofa? He demanded, raising his voice and half making me shit myself. I'm not going to answer any more of your questions until I've talked to a lawyer. Fine, it's your funeral, he threatened, rising from his chair and closing his notepad. A heavy-set African-American cop saved me from the suffocating room and booked me 2 doors down, collecting my fingerprints, snapping my photograph, and even scatting my belt in case I dug green. 207. Was a suicide risk. As I stood there cuffed and in awe of what was happening, Rose walked by the room and spotted me, doing a double take to make sure she was not seeing things. I have no idea why she was there that day, but her appearance meant doom for my life and I tried to salvage my future by smiling and saying hello to her. She ignored me, staring at me with my black ink-covered fingertips and turned to the person she was with whispering, and I thought he was such a nice boy. My guess was that there would be no more homemade breads given to me from that old snatch. After all of the arresting procedures were performed on me, I was led to a telephone where I was allowed to call my personal lawyer. Hank assured me that I had nothing to worry about and that he would take care of everything. For some reason his hollow assurances didn't make me feel any better. I was relieved to learn that I was the only criminal occupying the jail cell where I was being held, especially after watching several seasons of the HBO prison drama Oz at RST. I had a great curiosity about my unfamiliar surroundings, even wishing I had a camera hidden in my asshole so that I could dig it out and snap photos so I could share them with the grandkids someday. I knocked my ST lightly on the thick, clear plastic door and wondered if it was bulletproof. Next, I removed the sheets on the rickety cot and searched for the infamous mattress tag, which I had seen appear as a comedic punchline in so many movies in the past. Somebody must have torn it off during his stay there, because it was nowhere to be found. I gave up my search by hopping down on the bed, practically breaking my spine on the uncomfortable, paper-thin mattress. I lay there motionless, staring at graffiti that had been etched into the wall using a sharp tool or fingernail. Anger swelled inside me and I felt my face and ears grow hot as the blood rushed upwards. At RST I felt intense hatred towards not only Jill, but the police and the system as well. I consoled my anger by thinking that I 208. No wife, no kids, no plan. Would get revenge on each of the perpetrators once the revolution started, only to stop myself with the realization that perhaps a revolution was never going to happen in the RST place. At best maybe a few rebel college students would burn their American Express cards, or a handful of Microsoft employees who had been replaced by F-Cient robots would toss stones at one of Bill Gates' mansions, but how much worse than that could it possibly get? Who was I to put a righteous stake in the ground, especially after I had been abusing and milking the same system for years? It only took a few hours for me to be released from jail. Hank arrived at the station and paid the bail bondsman, and I soon found myself in his cushy, secure Lincoln Town car. Hank was a short, stocky man who was always hunched over and who spent the majority of his free time rubbing the edges of his coarse beard. He had all of the mannerisms of an agitated gorilla. He was unfriendly, unhappy, and unpleasant. He was excruciatingly unlikable, but when it came down to it, he was the perfect lawyer for all of those same reasons. I didn't do it, I told him. Hank's dark brown eyes were large, unsympathetic loopholes. It doesn't matter, he said. We're going to have to make a deal. What deal? With who? The girl who accused you and the lawyer she called in to represent her. Are you kidding me? I shrieked. I'm innocent. Right now it's her word against yours, and at the end of the day, people tend to side with the victim. Victim? She isn't the victim. I am. Listen, a trial is going to be costly, Hank told me, doing his best to come off like he actually cared. If the state charges you, and Doug Green. 209. I think they will, you're looking at the very least, $50 grand to defend your word against hers. I collapsed against the window of the Lincoln Town car, smashing my forehead into the glass, hoping that my head would split open and the ridiculousness would pour out. What do you suggest? I asked. I prayed for mercy in his response. If it's money that she's after, and I think it is, I say we just make a deal with her lawyer and get this off of your plate as quickly as possible. How much is it going to cost me? I'm ballparking it at $20,000. $25,000. I screamed. All I did was have dinner with the bitch and then had the worst sex of my life, consensual I might add. And you're telling me that's worth $20,000? Sorry, Hank shrugged, tugging at his beard. This is just a payoff. Isn't that illegal? Technically, no. You would be agreeing to pay her therapy bills. For what? So she won't testify against you. How is she going to recant what she already told the police? These things happen all of the time and nobody thinks anything of it. It will disappear as quickly as it manifested itself. This is wrong, Hank, I told him as I rested my tired head in my hands. I didn't rape the woman. Are we even sure that they'll go through with pressing charges? Her lawyer isn't in the business of bluff, Angie. He's got the nuts against you and you need to decide if you want to go all in with him, or fold and return to play another hand another day. 210. No wife, no kids, no plan. I thought about the risks in going to trial and the possibility of it winding up in the papers. It would ruin me, the business, and everyone else that counted on me in that of CE, including the families of those in my employ. I'm screwed, aren't I? As your legal counsel, you know I can't just come right out and tell you that, but as your friend, I wouldn't disagree with your statement. Okay, but what about offering them like 10,000 to start? How did you get to 20,000? Because her lawyer knows that it costs FTY 1,000 to 70,000 to take a case like this to trial, he informed me. 20-VE is half of FTY and 10 is just chicken shit. Fine, I told him in defeat. I guess just go ahead with it then. You know what you're doing. I turned and stared out the window, watching life pass me by at a speed of 40 miles per hour. Hank was taking me home and I thought about going to see Jennifer when I arrived, spilling the beans on everything that happened between Jill and the events that transpired following our drunken tryst. Good honesty was the best approach, but I also knew that things would never be the same between us. I had destroyed the mutual sanctuary that we built. I had let the world inside. Hank dropped me off in front of my house and assured me that he would make it all disappear. I pinched myself as I took the walk of shame up to my porch, but I wasn't dreaming and I didn't wake up. Instead, I was greeted by Louie and Mikey, both sitting amongst a pile of smoked cigarettes and eager for me to return home. Did she squeal like a pig? Louie blurted out. Shut the fuck up, you fat fuck. Mikey said, looking at me with inquiring eyes. What the hell is going on, man? Rose said she saw Doug Green. 211. You at the police station and the rumor around the neighborhood is that you raped some woman. It's about money, I told him. Nothing more than that. The broad is just trying to shake you down for dough. Something like that. How much is she asking for? Louis asked. What the fuck is the difference? Mikey protested. It's none of your fucking business. He didn't rape the broad anyway, so it doesn't matter. Hey, I know plenty of guys who didn't do the deed, but ended up having to pay or do time. I'm sure he's got a good lawyer anyway. You do got a good lawyer, right? I nodded my head yes, trying to block out their voices. Is he Jewish? Louis asked. Does that really matter? Mikey shouted. You're out of control, Louis. I should have kicked your ass when you sold that bum dryer to Rose. I'm just saying, everybody knows that Jews make the best lawyers. What's wrong with you? What were you breastfed by the cleaning lady? We didn't have no cleaning lady Pepe Le Pew. I thought I told you not to call me that, Mikey said angrily. Why Pepe Le Pew? I asked. Because he farts more than anyone else on the planet. He's a human skunk. At least I don't go around kissing hookers. According to Mikey, he saw Clea get in Louis' wagon the other day and the evidence of a close encounter was creeping up on his lower lip in the form of a newborn cold sore. 212. No wife no kids no plan. I mean who goes around making out with hookers in this part of town anyway? Mikey continued. I'd rather have oral sex with a toilet bowl than that ice cream jingling broad. I told you a car door hit me in the lip, Louis insisted. You might want ice that thing, Louis, I said. You're going to need the gigantic Costco package of chapstick as well, Mikey told him. That's where I get my condoms. It's the only place I know where you can get a box of condoms with a handle on it. It's fucking great. If ever I go to Thailand, that box of rubbers is going to be my carry-on luggage. Getman walked by us with his usual murderous glare. He was nursing a serious black eye and a fat jaw from the beating he took from the cops. I barked at him when he passed by and he turned to all three of us, snarling at us with his swollen face and giving us the bird. Why don't you shove that, Anger up your ass and smoke it, Getman? Mikey yelled. Louis and I stared and Mikey, confused by his choice of insults. What the hell was that supposed to mean? I asked him. Who the fuck cares? Mikey said. It sounded tough, and that's all that matters. Nobody cares what an insult means, just that it sounds scary when you say it. I'll take your word for it, Mikey. Louis pointed across my yard toward Mrs. Fazano's house. Heads up, he said. Mrs. Fazano is heading this way. I turned and watched as Mrs. Fazano tiptoed over to the fence that separated our yards and leaned against it. Like a hawk soaring in the sky for an afternoon snack, her eyes settled on a ketchup stain on Louis's shirt. I heard them again last night, she hooted, looking especially like a bag lady that day. Who, Mrs. Fazano? Mikey questioned. Doug Green. 213. The birds are pulling the nails out of my house. One by one, they will be removed and it will fall to the ground on top of me. They'd need steel beaks to do that, Mikey explained, sympathetic to the craziness attacking the old woman's brain. They are trying to bring down my house, she howled. I'll be crushed. Mrs. Fazano, if you want, I'll get the ladder from Rose's garage and hammer the nails back in. Will that help? Without warning, Mrs. Fazano ran into her house, slamming the screen door on her way inside. A few minutes passed as we all sat in silence, staring in the direction of her house as if waiting to see a crow or sparrow, fly off with a carpenter's nail. It never happened, but Mrs. Fazano did eventually return, this time carrying a paper bag. She handed it to Mikey without saying a word and then disappeared back into the house. Mikey reached his hand inside the bag and pulled out a mystery item wrapped in tin foil. Louis and I looked on with great curiosity as he unwrapped the gift. Mikey gasped for air when he caught his RST glimpse and whiff of what was inside. It's chicken, he moaned. It's at least a month old, but it's chicken. Let me smell it, Louis demanded as he hovered his nose over the rotten piece of meat. Louis turned his head after a brief smell of the chicken and dry heaved as he attempted to up his breakfast. It's rotten, he announced between gags. No kidding, Mikey said sarcastically. You're as smart as a whip, Louis. What are you going to do with it? I asked Mikey. He made a motion to throw Mrs. Fazano's present into my yard and I stopped his hand before he could release the putra, Ed Poultry. 214. No wife, no kids, no plan. Whoa! I shouted. Not in my yard. It will kill all of the good bacteria that occupy this space. With those big arms of yours, I bet you can reach Getman's driveway if you put a little heart and muscle into it. With a mischievous grin pasted to his face, Mikey lunged back, cocking his arm like a slingshot. Resembling a professional baseball pitcher, he hurled the spoiled breast in the air, throwing it down onto the blacktop of Getman's driveway, just inches from the savage pit bull that emotionally terrorized the neighborhood. How's that for a shot, he boasted. Driven by hunger and curiosity, the dog wandered over to the piece of chicken, sniff, Angie it brie, why before in goal, Angie the entire package, tin foil and all. Look, it's eating it. Louis blurted out. The way Getman trains that thing to hate the world, it probably hasn't been fed in a month, I said. We watched as the dog started to hack on its impromptu meal. I think it's choking, I told them. It is. Louis panicked. Does anyone know the Heimlich maneuver? I asked. I ain't doing no Heimlich on a pit bull, Mikey proclaimed. Besides, the fucking beast deserves a slow, painful death. The dog walked in circles as it furiously tried to expel the lodged piece of Mrs. Fazano's killer chicken. Even though it was covered in fur, I could have sworn I saw the pit bull's face turn blue and before we knew it, its legs gave out and he collapsed to the ground. We watched as its stomach pulsated a few times, the last signs of life before the dog went still. I always knew that dog was going to die young, I said. How can we be sure it's dead? Mikey asked. Maybe we should send Louis over to check its pulse. Doug Green. 215. To hell with you, Louis barked. I'm no animal doctor, but that thing is as dead as a dead dog can get. Look, I said, interrupting all of the dog talk. Here comes Jimmy. Jimmy parked his car in front of his house and made his way over to us carrying a big bag with Colonel Sanders' image on it. He reached in, pulled out a crispy leg and tore a piece of ash from the bone using his choppers. There a party going on over here or something? Jimmy asked. If so, I got some KFC to contribute. They had a special on a 12-piece today. So who wants some? We were all silent. What, my chicken not good enough for you slackers? I just ate, Louis told him. Yeah, me too, but thanks anyway, Mikey said. I'm allergic, I announced. Jimmy looked at the three of us suspiciously. Okay. I'll be on my porch if anybody changes their mind then. Jimmy walked down the street, past Mrs. Fazano's house, to his porch, not noticing the dead dog sprawled out in Getman's driveway. Do you think we should tell him? Louis asked. Nah, Mikey said. Jimmy knows how to defend himself if shit goes down. But Getman's psycho. So is Jimmy. The guy doesn't have any teeth. We watched as Jimmy relaxed on his front steps eating his, "Enger lickin' good chicken." You could sense the tension in the air that afternoon and you knew there was a good chance the pot could boil over. This is going to get ugly, Louis said. 216. No wife, no kids, no plan. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure, but I should get going, Mikey announced as he stretched. I've got some stuff that needs to get done. Me too, Louis chimed in. I gotta get to my mother's. Louis ran to his wagon and sped away, leaving a skid mark on the pavement in front of my house. By the way, I've got something to tell you, Mikey said before leaving. I heard Rose on the phone this morning talking to Jennifer's aunt. They were talking about you and how she saw you at the police station. Jennifer knows, man. My shoulders slumped and I looked down at my feet. My fantasy life was over before it ever began. I'm sorry, man, but you're never going to see that girl again. Nope, I'm really not, but it's my own fault. I did this to myself. Mikey started to walk towards Rose's place. Let me know how everything works out, okay? Mikey told me as he left me to my thoughts. I stepped inside the house, collapsing onto the couch and sitting in complete silence. The reality that I would never be with Jennifer again hit me like a ton of bricks. The entire neighborhood, including Jennifer, knew that I had slept with Jill. She no doubt thought of me as a liar and a con man, and I knew rebuilding her trust in me would be impossible. Even if she felt no anger towards me whatsoever and only sadness, I couldn't mend what was already broken. It was Charlie over. Suddenly my silence was interrupted by Hori, screaming, and I poked my head onto the porch to see what was going on. What did you do to my dog? Getman screamed as he walked towards Jimmy. You killed my fucking dog. Doug Green. 217. Jimmy looked over at the expired pit bull, wiped the chicken off of his face and yelled back, I didn't kill no dog, ya prick. What's all of your chicken doing all over my driveway then, Jimmy boy? Answer me that. It ain't my chicken, numbnuts. Furious, Getman stopped his march towards Jimmy and retreated back to his house, stepping into his garage and reappearing with a shovel in his hands. Maybe a good whack on your head will refresh your memory. Getman yelled. Are you threatening me, Getman? Jimmy put down his chicken and headed for his own garage, reappearing a few minutes later with a rumbling weed whacker. The two heated men pushed their way towards each other and a small crowd had already started to gather. You want a piece of me? Well, you've got it. Jimmy screamed. I rushed down the stairs of my porch and ran into the street, getting between Jimmy and Getman. They would have killed each other had I not stepped in, and I couldn't have that on my conscience when it was my suggestion that Mikey throw the chicken into Getman's yard in the RST place. What's going on here? I asked loudly so that I could be heard over the purring motor of the weed whacker. This motherfucker says I killed his motherfucking dog. That's nonsense, Getman, I told him. Your dog was dead before Jimmy even got here. You know who killed my dog? He asked me with rage in his eyes. Actually I do. It was a drive-by chicken chucker. Some car pulled up in front of your house and the driver tossed the rest of his 218. No wife, no kids, no plan. Dinner out of the window. Your dog sucked it down and then died. If it means anything, he went pretty quickly. You fucking liar, Getman proclaimed, foaming at the mouth and spitting in my face as he enunciated his words. I don't believe you. So what, I said, RMLY. Believe what you want, but that's how it happened. Getman pointed his shovel in my face and warned, I'm going to get you. You won't know when, but I'll get you and you'll be sorry. I can promise you that. Getman walked to his driveway, picked his dead dog up in his arms and headed into his garage where he closed the door and disappeared out of sight. How come you didn't tell me about his dog? Jimmy asked immediately. I made the story up to get you out of that jam. You didn't need to be throwing down with Getman in the middle of the street. So what the hell really happened to his dog? Who knows? I shrugged. This place is really starting to get to me, Jimmy said. Between Mrs. Fasano and that crazy fuck Getman, I'm dealing with a bunch of nuts. You are the only sane one around here. Thanks, Jimmy. That means a lot coming from you. We both walked back to our porches and went about our day. Jimmy continued eating his KFC as I received a call on my cell phone from my lawyer Hank. He told me that Jill bit on the monetary bait we dangled in front of her and that I was off the hook. He also informed me that my accomplice in billboard vandalism Jamal would be released from prison later that day and that he too would not be prosecuted. I told him to arrange it so that I could be there to pick him up when they let him off and he agreed to make that call. Doug Green. 219. Not long after I hung up with Hank, my cell phone rang again, only this time it was Rooster. I just spoke with Hank, babes, he said without saying hello, RST. I had no idea Jill was that type of girl, man. The wife just met her a month ago. You know how much that date cost me? 20-VE $1,000 and most likely someone that means something to me. That's it, Rooster. I'm not coming back. I'm done. Babes, let's talk this out. The company will pay the attorney's fees. It doesn't matter. I'm out. Rooster was silent. I've got to go, I continued. I've got stuff to do. I hung up the phone and breathed a sigh of relief. I had done it. I had, nearly cut myself off from the company, and even though it felt invigorating in the moment, it was no consolation for how I was feeling over ruining things with Jennifer. Mrs. Fasano stepped out into her front yard for some early afternoon vacuuming. I decided to go and have a talk with her about Jimmy. He had endured enough torture at my hands and I felt as though it was my civic duty to bring peace between him and his slightly off-kilter neighbor. I walked around the fence and stepped into Mrs. Fasano's yard. I hope you don't mind me coming over like this, Mrs. Fasano, but there is something I've been meaning to speak with you about. I told her. I've read quite a few vampire books and in all of them, they say that vampires can only come out in the dark. If he comes out in the light, his skin would burn. You see, Jimmy couldn't be a vampire because he's out all day. Mrs. Fasano focused her eyes on a leftover dog hair still on my shirt from my trip in the police cruiser this morning. Everything is upside down, she informed me. 220. No wife, no kids, no plan. What do you mean? I asked. For the RST time her prying eyes managed to nd their way into my pupils. You must nd the light before it's too late, she told me. I didn't know how to respond and instead remained silent as she turned her back to me and walked up the stairs to her porch. With the current happenings in my life, Mrs. Fasano was almost making sense. Perhaps she wasn't crazy at all, but just needed to be interpreted. Or, perhaps she was a wise old sage pretending to be a mad hag. Maybe Jimmy really was a vampire using a strong sunscreen. I supposed anything was possible, and if anything was possible, then perhaps I still had a chance to redeem myself in Jennifer's eyes. I went inside to shower off all of the day's activities. I looked in the mirror to do the standard check of odd features or abnormalities, and although everything seemed to be in perfect order, I was not I felt sick to my stomach over what I had done with Jill, and I slumped away from the mirror disgusted with myself. I had never felt so much hate towards one person, that person being myself. 15. I walked over to Jennifer's house even though I knew the stairs would be empty. I saw the plant I had given her. It was sitting innocently on the porch ledge. On top of a stem, I noticed a lone leaf wavering in the summer breeze. I felt nauseous and I rushed home, fearful that I was about to be sick. On my way to pick up Jamal from the police station, I made a pit stop at Gold's Artie, Chail Limbs. I felt compelled to talk with Mr. Gold, even though I knew it wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. Upon entering his empty store, Mr. Gold immediately gave me a disapproving and strained look. I screwed up, I told him. I'm man enough to admit that. Mr. Gold wagged his finger at me and with an authoritative tone said, "You took caca and you threw it on something good. You've made your bed and now you have to lie in it, caca and all. I know what I did was wrong. I acted like an ape. What separates us from the apes is our ability to embrace free will and restrain ourselves when temptation calls, but you son were unable to restrain yourself. So yes, you are an ape. Mr. Gold, I really am crazy about Jennifer. If you ask me, you are not ready for love. True love means that you are willing to give up all your wants and let go of the meshuggah. You don't want to change. You embrace the meshuggah. But that's just it, Mr. Gold, I said. I do want to change. That's why I'm here, living where I am. I've been trying to make a change in my life for some time now. 221. 222. No wife, no kids, no plan. Maybe in more time than will you achieve your goal, but you've got some work to do and some personal growth that must take place, RST. You are still an infant in many ways. You are just a boy. Now, you must go. I have much work to attend to. I exited the store and stood on the sidewalk, staring at the early American burial ground across the street. Although I never directly asked Mr. Gold if there was anything I could do to salvage my one-time blossoming relationship with Jennifer, I had my answer, and that was a resounding no. I was overwhelmed with depression as I drove to pick up Jamal. Mr. Gold's words about not being ready for love echoed in my ears, and I looked up into the rearview mirror, hoping that a profound answer would present itself on my face or in my eyes. Life doesn't work like the movies, however, and I was not granted a get-out-of-jail-free card that I could use to climb out of the hole I had dug for myself. I arrived at the same police station Hank had picked me up at a few hours before and headed inside. I stopped at the front desk and informed the police of, "Sir," that I was there to pick up Jamal Wilson. He made a call and then asked me to wait in one of a half-dozen steel chairs positioned against a white wall. "You don't by any chance have any magazines to read, do you?" I asked the sir. He lifted his glasses and gave me a long look. "No, but if you wait another 30 minutes, the dancing girls will be here." I chuckled to myself and sat down. No more than 30 seconds passed before the same detective who interrogated me about Jill appeared, spinning his large set of janitor-style keys around his finger. "You know a lot of lawyers, don't you?" he asked me, catching me off guard. Doug Green. 223. They are good people to know when you're charged with a crime that you didn't commit. The detective bent down in my face, positioning himself within licking distance. He breathed heavily and I could tell what he had for lunch. "I've seen plenty of characters like you in my time as a cop, and do you know where they all are now?" he asked me. "Let me guess. In jail. Better yet, dead." "I think you have the wrong impression of me, detective. I'm not who you think I am." "Yeah, and I hate to break it to you, buddy, but you're not who you think you are either," he told me as he walked away. Those words struck a nerve inside me. Had I been fooling myself all along by moving to the hood? What did I hope to accomplish in starting my own personal revolution? A pair of Sayers brought Jamal into the waiting area where he was shocked to see my smiling face. "What the fuck are you doing here?" he asked me. "Bribing your ass out of jail and giving you a ride home. Now let's get out of here." We exited the station and slid into my car. Jamal was visibly confused, but grateful for the assist I had given him. "I owe you," Jamal told me in his usual deep and serious voice. "I'll square up with you on the money you spent as soon as I get it." "And how you going to get the money?" I asked him, mimicking his own tone and mannerisms. "When I get back in the game, you'll get it. I'm a man of my word." "Are you fucking stupid or just a stubborn prick?" I asked. I knew I was taking a chance talking to Jamal that way, but he was the kind of guy that respected testosterone-fueled behavior. 224. No wife, no kids, no plan. Violence and rage were all he knew in life, so if verbally berating him was the only way I could get through to him, then I was willing to give it a try, even if it meant him retaliating with his STS. After all, I was still angry with myself over what I had done to Jennifer and I didn't really care about the consequences. I deserved a beating and maybe I was even looking for one. "What the fuck did you just say to me?" Jamal said with a threatening look. "You just dodged a mandatory 10 years in prison. You could be on a bus right now with silver shackles locked to your legs headed to a maximum security nightmare. So, I've done time before. Not 10 years you haven't. Do you really want to spend 10 fucking years in jail? I gotta eat and hustling is all I know." "There are other ways to eat, Jamal," I told him, hoping that I'd say something that would make sense to him. "These detectives are going to be watching you like a hawk. You so much as sell Viagra or an over-the-counter aspirin and they're going to lock your ass up." Jamal pulled down the visor and checked his teeth in the tiny mirror attached to it. "I made a mistake last time they pinched me. That shit won't happen again cause I plan on being more careful next time." "Jesus, Jamal, how can you be that fucking narrow-minded when it comes to your future? Cause it's my fucking life and you ain't living it for me," he screamed. "Now I know you got me out of there and for that I'm grateful, but you best stop fucking disrespecting me the way you're doing right now or you're going to set me the fuck off." That's when I decided to take a different approach with Jamal, both for strategy and self-preservation's sake. "Jamal, I'm sorry, but I don't want to see you end up in prison." Doug Green. 225. "What the fuck do you care for?" "I don't know," I told him. "I just do. And to prove it, I can set you up with a job. Even help you start your own business. You could do real estate here. Fix up run-down houses and then rent them out or turn them over. It's the wave of the future in this part of the country and there's a lot of money to be had. And who's got the money to move into renovated crack houses in the hood? It doesn't have to be in the heart of the hood. We'll snag places closer to the city. It's a gold mine waiting to be tapped, Jamal. I'm telling you, it's a better way to live than ding for your next dollar from some junky piece of shit looking to get high. I'll front the money and let you take the helm." Jamal was silent. "At least tell me you'll think about it," I pleaded. "I don't know nothing about real estate." "You can learn. You didn't know shit about the drug business until you jumped right in, right? It's different." "No it isn't. It's a game just like the one you're playing and believe me, you'll figure it out fast. The majority of the wealthy people that inhabit this world of ours did it in real estate. You think they're any smarter than you? Hell, some of them saw an ad on TV, took a course and now they're millionaires. And what about my boys? I can't just abandon them." I admired Jamal's loyalty to his friends because it was the same loyalty I felt towards the employees at the newspaper. While we both came from different worlds, Jamal and I weren't that different. We believed in the same principles and shared similar beliefs, but it was how we acted on them that made us opposites. "They'll work for you," I assured him. "You are going to need people to help in every aspect of the rebuilding process, So you'll pay 226. No wife, no kids, no plan. Them as your employees and they'll bany, tea from a regular paycheck every week. Jamal was, usted and he shifted in his seat, uncomfortable at the thought of taking a handout. Man, I don't want to hear any more of this shit, he said. Just get me back to my corner. Jamal, I want to help you. I told you. I don't want to talk about this anymore. Fine. Have it your way. We drove a few miles without either of us saying a word. I purposely left the radio off, hoping the silence would break Jamal, but he was a stubborn bull, refusing to give or take. Do you ever laugh, Jamal? I asked him. I mean seriously, I've never seen you even smile. How can someone go their entire life without laughing or smiling? Jamal continued playing the silent game. Well, I'm going to make you fucking laugh today if I have to die trying. The sidewalks were LLED with all types of pedestrians walking to and from places of no interest to me or Jamal. I swerved the car towards the side of curb and the fearless thug clutched at the dash. What the fuck are you doing? You're going to kill someone. Nope, just get them a little wet. My tires hit a monster-sized puddle created by a broken rehydrant and the murky water exploded from underneath my car, drenching at least a dozen unsuspecting victims. Sandy, brown, UID dripped from their clothing and hair as Jamal and I looked back at the now wet day walkers as they yelled profanities in our eeing direction. And then it happened. Jamal let out a roaring cackle that the US government could have bottled and sold to the highest bidder as a weapon of mass destruction. Having repressed the energy for so long, the laugh continued and I had to block my ears. Doug Green. 227. I stopped the car a block away so we could watch the chaotic sidewalk try to make sense of what had happened. We were spotted almost instantly by a soggy butch dyke with a decayed leaf stuck to her face. She ran towards us, waving a heavy chain in her hand, her circular nose ring, hopping up and down with each Tyrannosaurus Rex-like stomp, and I couldn't help but notice her forearms, which bulged like a juiced-up Popeye after pleasuring himself in the shower. Look at that crazy bitch coming at us, Jamal said with concern in his voice. We best blow this popsicle stand before she gets any closer. She looks like she's ready to kill someone. I shifted the car into reverse and started to back up in the direction of the charging dick-hating, ball-breaking bull dyke. Are you going to consider my offer? I asked Jamal. What the fuck are you doing? Jamal asked me with a confused look on his face. We were getting close to within striking distance of the beefy clam digger, who upon closer inspection looked a lot like Hulk Hogan minus the mustache. I'm waiting for an answer. You crazy ass white boy. Yes or no? I'll think about it. Jamal blurted out, just in the nick of time. I shifted the car into RST gear and sped off, just as the behemoth swung at us with her chain. The metal links, unable to connect with anything, spun around and hit their owner in the back of the head. We watched as she dropped to the ground, grabbing nothing but a face full of asphalt. Man, I've been in knife, GHTS and gun battles, but this is the RST time I've ever known fear, Jamal said with a re-active look. That dyke bitch was huge. 228. No wife, no kids, no plan. She would have chained your balls off. Man, you are one crazy ass white boy. After deciding that we wanted a bite to eat, I pulled into a Denny's parking lot and we headed inside. We were seated immediately and both opted to order our food without even looking at the menu. Jamal sipped from a glass of water as I excused myself to go to the bathroom, my bladder still bursting from the hilarity of a man-like woman sprinting towards my car in anger. I chose a urinal because the toilets were all LLED with leftover logs from the person before me. As I was washing my hands, my cell phone rang. It was Rooster. What's up, Rooster? I said. I'm kind of in the middle of something. Babes, it's an emergency, he said in a panic. I'm at the CE on a Saturday trying to make a dent in some paperwork I need to, LE away and Harry just came in and quit. Is he still in the building? He's packing up his belongings as we speak. Rooster, I want you to listen to me very carefully. A guy walked into the bathroom as I was talking on the phone, entered a nearby stall and began grunting up a storm as if he was giving birth to the largest turd to ever hit a toilet bowl. Babes, what's that noise? Rooster asked me. I'm in the bathroom. Some asshole is literally shitting his brains out. Now listen to me, Rooster. Tell Harry you spoke to me and that we have an offer for him. Tell him that if he stays, he can have my equity in the company. It will start making him think like a businessman instead of a hired-on editor. Make it vest over a 4-year period. Are you sure you want to do that, babes? It's the right decision and it's the only thing that's going to keep him on board. Doug Green. 229. After the guy taking the elephant-sized crap sprang out of the stall with an open switchblade in his hand. He was Hispanic and he had daggers in his eyes that matched the one he grasped. Rooster, I gotta go. Just do what I said, okay? Okay. I'm on it. I hung up the phone and ran for the bathroom door, high-stepping it all the way to my table where Jamal was already eating his grilled cheese and French fries. I sat down, my nerves obviously rattled, and looked back over my shoulder at the knife-wielding Hispanic madman who was now headed towards me. Jamal's eyes locked onto him like an F-16 on a MiG and he stood out of his chair, slapping his chest like a gorilla protecting his jungle territory. You got a problem, chump. Upon seeing that Jamal was with me, the massive pooper pooped himself once again and slowly backed his way out of the restaurant. Jamal returned to his seat and popped a pickle in his mouth. I need your advice on something, I told him, smearing ketchup on my burger. Stop fucking with gangbangers in public bathrooms. That's the advice you're getting from me. No, I said. That's not it. I fucked up recently. I really like this girl in my life and she found out I was with another woman. I blew it. What happened to your revolution, white boy? It's a bullshit theory. You can say that again. Jamal polished off his grilled cheese and poured a mound of ketchup in its place so he could freely dip his fries into it. So is your bitch from around here, he asked me. Yeah, right down the street from me, and if I'm being honest, she's the best woman I ever met. You sure your mind's not playing tricks on you? 230. No wife, no kids, no plan. No, she's the real deal. Man, you got more dreams than a junkie. I don't know what to do to make it right. Why did you mess with the other bitch in the RST place if you like this other one so much? It was there and she was offering, so I took it. We've all been there before. A guy's not expected to keep his dick in his pants. We're all animals when you take away the clothing and the goods, homie. Jamal nished his fries and slid his empty plate to the end of the table where a busboy quickly scoffed it up. He sipped on his water. You talk to her, he asked me. She won't talk to me. She doesn't want to have anything to do with me. I should introduce you to my cousin Julia. She'll straighten your white ass right out. She as big as you? I asked, unable to eat because the continuous thought of breaking Jennifer's trust in me cost me my appetite. Bigger. I pushed my full plate to the end of the table and before the busboy could scoff it up, Jamal pulled it over in front of him and started to nish my burger. The whole mess is my fault. I guess I don't deserve her. Jamal was quiet. I could tell he was thinking something. He probably knew that my cause with Jennifer was lost but he didn't want to tell me. The waitress slapped our bill down on the table and I threw enough on the table to cover it. I reached into my opposite pocket and pulled out a wad of $100 bills and handed it to Jamal. This is for living expenses, I told him. Consider it a down payment on our deal. Doug Green. 231. Jamal stared down at the money wide-eyed. He sighed and shook his head. I told you I'd think about, he said in a soft, un-Jamal-like voice. It's okay, take your time. I'll wait. We left the restaurant and I dropped Jamal off at the corner he was famous for occupying. Somehow I reached through to him though because he walked past the pole he so often leaned against and headed to wherever it was he called home. 16. Instead of going home, I turned my car around and drove directly into the city, parking my car by the Charles River and stepping out in the unusually quiet day. I was desperately in need of some soul searching because the anger I was feeling towards myself was choking the will to live right out of me. Part of me considered jumping into the river for what I did to Jennifer, and ultimately, for what I did to my own happiness, but instead I turned away from the bridge and walked into the heart of the city, wondering what Jennifer was doing and thinking at that moment. I convinced myself she was dug deep within a solitary bunker, her poetry and thoughts keeping her company while I wandered the landscape alone. I glanced up at the summer sun and let its warmth settle on my undeserving eyes. I had come so close to what I had been searching for my entire life for, and here I was wallowing in the realization that I had thrown it all away. My old ways were determined to leave with a GHT, and I took that last sip from the bottle only to discover it to be a deadly and poisonous concoction. I may have been freed from the rape charges that were wrongly brought against me, but I was still in prison. Having to live without Jennifer was my sentence. I continued walking as conversations I had once held with Jennifer replayed in my mind. I remembered how she explained her poetry to me, and more specifically, the part about watching the details of nature. That afternoon Mother Nature's cup over, ode, and my eyes didn't have to be specifically tuned to its frequency to see her presence. Due to a rainy spring a few months before, the vegetation was a lush green. The grass, the plants, and the trees that 232 Doug Green 233 grew tall above me all gave off a collective aura, and it seemed plausible that one could pass through this life giving off green electricity and travel into another time and space. Sadly, I knew that if Jennifer was with me in the moment she would feel the same thing. After all, it was the same dreamer of a woman that RST introduced me to this hidden world below the surface. She gave me so much in such a short period of time and opened my eyes to places I had visited, but never truly seen. But what did I do for her? Did I enlighten Jennifer to anything? Maybe my encounter with Jill was a saving grace for Jennifer. Could it have been her protective angel that intervened and stopped everything from progressing so that she wouldn't end up another casualty of my mad world? It was at that moment that I decided I was going to leave the hood. I didn't want to make Jennifer uncomfortable having to live beside me day in and day out, and I didn't need to reside on Oak Street in order to make sure Jamal stayed on track. In fact, once I was sure he'd be headed in the right direction, I'd relocate to my log home and miniature mountain in Pennsylvania, where I'd try to find peace in the woods and in the silence of my mind. I'd choose never again to return to the world stage, and decided I was better to play the role of the hermit, locked away from the rest of society. I continued across Starrow Drive and along the Charles, where I watched ducks glide with the water's current. A large blackbird with a long crowbar-shaped neck dove continuously, breaking and entering into sh. At the river's edge, a robin repeatedly stabbed a worm in broad daylight, and the wind, using tall blades of grass, scribbled its bent signature in the air. The river led me to the heart of Boston. I passed by Faneuil Hall Marketplace, which was a melting pot of designer labels, including the Safari stock, the classic cocky Persuasion, and the Brooks brothers and sisters who strolled along with their hands in their pockets. ANX 234 No wife, no kids, no plan. ES to liberate funds. And of course there were the next generation of Nikes and Pumas in their basketball blazers, the young cattle already name branded and milked by parent companies. I passed by a homeless man on the sidewalk with a sign next to him that read, "Why lie? I need a drink." I handed him a $20 bill and he said with a penetrating stare, "God bless you." I headed away from the crowd and reached the edge of Market Street. Above me there was a row of birds standing on a live wire whose high voltage could not affect them. The tiny birds were preoccupied, indifferent to human sounds, solitary but connected. Their music seemed so out of place amidst the concrete plains. I closed my eyes and consumed a substantial portion of their symphony, each note coming off as perfection. It was like drinking from a watering hole of beauty. The sounds of horns and sirens faded into a living silence, the same silence emanating from a desert dune or a majestic mountain. It was here, all around, in the seemingly dead space of the city. I opened my eyes. All of the birds had disappeared. Several people were looking at me with curious expressions, and I told myself that they're in between places, but it was me who was between worlds. I walked over to an empty bench and sat down. At my feet, a small blade of grass had found its way through the cobblestone. It wavered back and forth in the summer breeze. Nature was young at half-mast. 17. When I got home I witnessed the RST miracle of my life. Jennifer, stripped of any surface anger, was sitting on my porch steps with her legs crossed. I sat down next to her and tried to say the RST word, but she beat me to the punch. Jamal told me what you did for him and how you gave him a second chance, she told me, unable to yet look me in the eye. He also told me that I should give you a second chance because you are the most messed up person he's ever met. What did you say? I quietly asked. I told him how my father was a drug dealer and that when I was, both of my parents were murdered when one of his deals went bad. I told him that I could tell he was a good man and to stop pretending to be somebody he wasn't. I'm so sorry, I said. I had no idea about your parents. A single tear rolled down Jennifer's cherubic cheek and I embraced her, holding her tight. This was her dark secret, and as much as I felt terrible for her loss and apparent lifelong pain, I couldn't help but feel an incredible sense of relief and joy that she was back in my life. The tender aim I was trying to forget only a short time ago now burned like a airy furnace. She placed her soft hands on each of my shoulders and looked deep into my eyes, penetrating my soul with her gentle gaze. I met them with a look of love, which beamed from my core like a homing beacon. I was so happy and so in the moment that I couldn't stop a tear of my own from escaping. I'm sorry for what I did. It will never. 235. 236. No wife, no kids, no plan. Jennifer put her hand over my mouth before I could nish and said, Jamal told me what you said to him and I'm choosing to believe in you. And now I would like to take that ride that you promised me. I pulled the magical key to the Ferrari out of my pocket and we waltzed over to the car and took the top down. It was a bright and warm day, the perfect weather for a sun-soaked drive to the ocean. I feel kind of embarrassed about crying earlier, I told her, already on the road. I haven't shed a single tear since I was 10. What happened when you were 10? She asked me. My father beat the crap out of me for throwing a kid's tricycle in the pond behind our house. Man, did I take a beating that day. Jennifer laughed out loud and I joined in. I drove slowly through the crowded streets of the city's suburbs. Jennifer observed how everybody was staring at the car as it drove by them and I told her that she was mistaken and that the many envious eyes were looking at her. She smiled and in that smile I learned what Mr. Gold meant by giving up all of your wants in the face of love. The only want I had was to see Jennifer happy and to be witness to that mesmerizing smile for the rest of my life. Soon we were on the highway and Jennifer could tell I was holding back from driving the car fast. Come on. You promised. I pressed the pedal to the floor and the white lines on the road now burned like a fuse, blaring by in a hypnotic state. I shifted the car into its highest gear, sending all the needles to the far right of the dials. The Ferrari cut through the lower atmosphere like a black meteor launched from the bowels of the city. Jennifer was exhilarated and she kept looking over at me intermittently and smiling and laughing. The smashing wind was blowing her hair wildly about, snapping in her face like miniature bullwhips. Jennifer would often stick her arm outside of the car and Doug Green. 237. Enjoy the effect of it being hurled backwards as we raced forward. Everything I was experiencing was now through Jennifer's eyes. Everything she was seeing for the RST time I, too, was seeing for the RST time. Our journey seemed to by as we swam in each other's excitement, and before I knew it we were in Maine, spotting signs for the various beaches that stretched along the coastline. We took an early exit from the highway, eager to see the water. Upon leaving the high-speed world of the interstate, we reached a quiet interlude and enjoyed a rush of silence, idling in the ripe country air that nipped at our noses like a hyperactive puppy. I leaned over to Jennifer and lightly kissed her lips, and she returned a warm smile. Within minutes we were slowly passing through green space, surrounded on all sides by elds and pastures. We breezed by boys who peered at the car and cows who were immune. By mothers who took clothes off of the line and fathers who lowered the stars and stripes. By an old man on a rocking chair, unmoved, and by an old refrigerator in the yard, nobly rusting away. I drove for several long stretches and pulled to the side of the road when the camel-colored sands of the beaches appeared. It was dusk and all of the freckled sunbathers had left and moved on to their evening activities. We stepped out of the car and stumbled across the sand. Jennifer was staring at the ocean with large eyes and anticipation. I took her hand and we walked to the edge of the water. There we both immediately fell into the undertow of an amiable breeze. The ocean air LLED our nostrils as the endless waves were lapping the shore. Jennifer's eyes sizzled with the sparkling green light. "Close your eyes," she said. I shut my eyes with my thoughts still on the green electricity I saw radiating from Jennifer's eyes. On the backside of my eyelids the darkness became celestial space and the white sparkles became glistening stars. I looked on with amazement at the heavenly lights. 238. No wife, no kids, no plan. And felt a cosmic presence all around me. I found myself amongst an invisible orchestra and the song playing was the music of the spheres. Jennifer's poem became a reality for me, and for the RST time I understood everything about her hidden world that she couldn't describe to me. Jennifer was right. The universe was bare and bountiful. We opened our eyes at the very same time. Jennifer's face was wet from the ocean mist and I kissed her and she kissed me back, sending my heart into love-fueled palpitations. The woman of my dreams, soft and sensitive, circled the top of my tongue with hers and instantly ignited the pilot light to my sexual soul. Our mouths erupted into each other's and the voltage we released made my spirit soar. We continued to explore with our tongues, penetrating deeper and deeper. Drawn closer together, Jennifer and I seesawed back and forth between her life force and mine, and I felt an incredible discharge of energy explode from the innermost portion of my being. I lost track of everything: time, space, and myself. I embraced all the beauty that swirled around me and I couldn't resist telling her how I felt. "I love you," I said, whispering softly so not to disturb the moment. Jennifer stood on her tiptoes and moved her lips up to my ear. "I love you too," she whispered back. Life, Nally, had meaning for me. We moved to a stone wall built to stop beach erosion and sat in silence. We looked out into the vastness of the ocean and felt small in its presence. It seemed like time had stopped. I felt a return to a long-forgotten world, an awakened dream state, and best of all, Jennifer was there beside me experiencing the same. She was my bridge to this wonderful state of being. Jennifer was my safe cracker and combination provider, whether it was her angelic body giving me Doug Green. 239. Warmth beneath a disappearing sun, or the enchanting smell of her long brown hair and the salty ocean mixing together. I watched in slow motion as Jennifer's starry eyes peered out into the never-ending rolling of the sea. I kissed her gently on the lips and inhaled the life-giving breath from her mouth. She looked at me with a soft, heart-melting warmth, and it was at that moment I realized how deeply in love with each other we were and how we had become something beyond ourselves. "Will you go away with me and start fresh?" I asked her. We can make our home at my cabin in Pennsylvania and travel to beautiful places. I will go, she softly spoke, and we embraced and locked together in a kiss. The drive home was slow and quiet, a peaceful exchange between two people caught up in romantic thoughts. Every so often she would hold my hand or I would reach for hers. Periodically I opened my window halfway and took in the fresh night air. On one quick turn of my head, I managed to get a glimpse of the summertime canopy of stars, and I thanked the heavens for Jennifer and life itself. I dropped her off in front of her aunt's house and walked her to the door. We kissed some more and decided that we would leave tomorrow for Pennsylvania instead of waiting. We had both done enough waiting in our lives. I should get going, she said. I have a lot of packing to do before tomorrow. Me too, I told her. We kissed one last time and I had to force myself to walk away or we'd have stood on that porch until the sun came up. I waved goodbye as she entered her house and I headed to my apartment, parking the car in the driveway and running up the stairs eager to get my things thrown into a suitcase for my morning evacuation. 240. No wife, no kids, no plan. As I entered the front door I quickly found myself thrown down from the clouds and onto the hardwood, where frightened cockroaches scurried. Getman and 3 of his Nazi friends were waiting for me. I tried to defend myself at the start of their initial blows, but my roundhouses were no match for their stomping boots and lead pipes. They were hitting me everywhere at once and I genuinely feared for my life. Sensing my anguish, Getman bent down to me and said, "Look at the last face you are going to see on this earth, you piece of shit nigger lover. That's right, I saw you hanging out with that black gangbanger and now I'm going to send you to the same hell that he belongs in." I closed my eyes as the strikes continued against my body. If I was going to die, I wanted to picture Jennifer's face instead of staring into Getman's ugly mug. I was preparing for the worst when the pounding suddenly stopped. I heard the thunder of footsteps and guns being cocked. I opened my eyes and saw Jamal and 3 of his cohorts standing in the room like a ring squad, their weapons pointed at Getman and his bald head, racist friends. My 4 attackers were frozen in fear as the tables turned on them and they were now begging for their own lives. "Don't kill them!" I shouted. The Getman gang sighed in relief. "That doesn't mean I'm not going to have them crack your heads open, you dumb fuck," I told Getman. Jamal nodded to his friends, each bigger and meaner looking than the next, and they wasted no time laying into Getman and his friends. Teeth, blood, and tears were spilled all over my living room that night as 4 angry black men beat the snot out of 4 narrow-minded white guys. For the most part it went down like any other barroom brawl, but there were a few times that I had to look away because the tenderized ash of Getman made my stomach turn. Doug Green. 241. Jamal dragged a near unconscious Getman over to where Charlie was curled up beneath the couch, pulled the snake out and squeezed its jaws so that its mouth opened wide. Jamal placed the snake's fangs up against Getman's neck and slapped Getman awake so that he knew what was happening. Getman pleaded for his life, but lucky for him, Charlie had no appetite for the Nazi and he returned to his spot underneath the couch after Jamal released him. Jamal threw Getman towards the door as his 3 racist friends crawled out on their bellies, bloodied and beaten. "Next time we'll kill ya, ya Nazi fucks," I heard one of Jamal's friends say as they left my house. Jamal came over and lifted me off of the ground. "Been keeping an eye on you." "Well, what took so long?" I said as I realized every part of my body was either aching or bleeding. "I was thinking up my plan of attack," he said, laughing at my weary state. "I guess you do laugh more than I gave you credit for, huh?" "I laugh at what's funny, and you like this, it's pretty damn funny, white boy." Jamal went into the bathroom and grabbed a towel, handing it to me so I could wipe the blood off of my face. "Thanks," I said. "And thanks for talking to Jennifer. You saved my life twice." "Crazy ass white boy," Jamal muttered. Things were spinning out of control in the neighborhood and Getman's gang was sure to retaliate eventually. I asked Jamal if he wanted to come to Pennsylvania with Jennifer and me, but he declined, saying he'd rather stay in Boston. "How the hell are we going to do real estate if your ass isn't around?" he asked me. I smiled, knowing that Jamal had taken me up on my offer. 242. No wife, no kids, no plan. "I'm going to set up an account for you at my bank," I told him. "We'll start with 100,000. That should be enough for you to live on and to establish a line of credit in order to purchase your RST property." "Damn," he said, awed by my accounting. "That's a lot of money. It's what you need to get this operation running, but don't worry, I'll be there every step of the way as your partner." In this day and age, with cell phones and whatnot, doing business with miles in between isn't a hard thing to do. Jamal and I programmed each of our cell numbers into our phones, and I informed him that I would set a meeting between him and my banker for that Monday afternoon. I knew I was taking a risk with Jamal, but it would hopefully keep him off of the street and out of trouble, while also giving him a foundation to build on. It was a hefty goal to achieve, but using my credit line to buy a starter property that he could refurbish in hopes of ipping for a pretty pro-T was one that I felt he could deliver on. Jamal insisted on stationing 2 of his boys on the porch for the night in case Getman returned, even though I felt it wasn't necessary. We shook hands and he smiled at me for the RST time. "You be careful, you crazy ass white boy. And take care of that beautiful lady." "I will." "And you come to Pennsylvania and visit us soon." "I will." Jamal nodded affirmatively. After Jamal left, Mikey came running over with a hammer in his hand. "What's going on?" "Getman and his friends had a pipe fest on my body, but it's all copacetic now, Mikey. You can put the hammer down." Mikey offered to take me to the hospital, but I was feeling as dull, knowing that I was leaving with Jennifer in the morning. Doug Green. 243. I did secretly hope that they didn't cause any permanent damage to any of my bones or organs, and decided to just heat those parts that hurt the most. Hopefully I wouldn't look too mangled the next day and Jennifer would still want to run away with me. I told Mikey I was leaving and that I'd be a phone call away if needed me. He complained about having to hit the club solo, and I offered him one last piece of advice before we parted. "Wear some longer shorts next time you go to the gym," I said with a laugh. "The world has seen enough of your balls." We hugged and Mikey left, not even realizing that he just did me a solid by proving that friendship is more than just what you can do for me. I woke in the morning with butterflies in my stomach and ran to the bathroom. I looked in the mirror and was surprised to find only a few small bruises on my face and a single black eye that was far worse in my mind. None of my bones appeared to be broken, a small victory in my opinion after the beating I took the night before. After I finished packing, I opened the back door and set Charlie free, lecturing him on those things he could and could not eat in the wild, namely Rocky. With my suitcases in hand, I grabbed a few peanuts from the mantel and stepped outside, leaving them by the squirrel's water bowl. As I made my way down the stairs of my porch, I noticed Jennifer already standing by my car, suitcase in hand. "Oh my God," she said after noticing my face. "What happened to you?" "It's a long story," I told her as I loaded our things into the car. "Let's just say that Getman said goodbye to my face. But we have a long drive ahead of us, so let's save it for the road." After everything was packed into the car, including Jennifer, I looked at the house one last time. "Goodbye, old friend," I said to the house. 244. No wife, no kids, no plan. I smiled and jumped into the driver's seat, leaning over to Jennifer and kissing her on the lips. I started the car and let the engine rumble, only to pull out of the driveway and then out of the city en route to our new home.